3 hours of thought. Mazes with no exit to fall asleep to. Have you ever been trapped in a thought, not because it was wrong, but because it had no way out? Some questions don't want answers. Some mazes weren't built to be solved. They were built to be felt. What if your mind isn't broken when it loops? What if it's just listening to echoes from a deeper part of the universe? A part where paradoxes breathe, where time folds in on itself, where dreams ask you who you are, then disappear before you reply. Tonight, we'll wander those inner corridors, not to escape, but to float. Let go of the need to solve, sink into the rhythm of curiosity, and prepare to be carried, gently, slowly, through 3 hours of thought mazes, with no exit. Close your eyes, let the questions come, and let them stay unanswered. The invitation to wander. You didn't arrive here by accident. Somewhere between your last waking thought and the soft ache behind your eyes, something opened. Not a door, not a beginning, just an invitation. And now the mind is listening, not for commands, but for a rhythm, low, slow, and ancient, the kind that doesn't lead you out, but draws you inward. A voice, like fog on glass, asks, what if sleep isn't an escape, but a portal? Not to oblivion, but to the most intricate mazes the mind has ever dared to whisper into itself. There's no rush here, no grand thesis to unfold. This is not a lecture. This is a walk, barefoot and slow, across the carpet of your own thoughts. And the first thought, trembling like a match in the dark, is this: the mind is not a container. It is a labyrinth. You may think you've been navigating it for years, managing your calendar, solving problems, remembering your passwords. But those were only surface hallways. Underneath, there are deeper corridors, loops within loops, truths that shimmer until you reach for them, and then vanish like a breath on a mirror. Have you ever felt? Someone murmurs beside you, like your thoughts were already walking ahead of you, leading you somewhere you didn't mean to go? The stranger doesn't need an answer. Their presence alone is enough, because deep down, you recognize them. The part of you that wonders when you're alone, the part that watches the ceiling at night and thinks, maybe the most interesting places are the ones we're never supposed to find. In this spiral, clarity is not the destination. Confusion is not the enemy. Here, you walk not to know, but to dissolve. One hallway leads to a childhood memory, half true. Another bends toward a question you never dared to ask aloud. A stairwell you didn't notice dips into a room where your own voice waits, quiet, unfamiliar, unafraid. And suddenly, a question floats past like a feather. If I didn't choose this thought, who did? Silence answers, not with words, but with weight. The kind that makes you want to sit down in the middle of a dream and rest your head against the wall. You are not here to arrive. You are here to listen, to follow the echo of yourself bouncing off unfamiliar walls. And if you get lost, good. That means it's working. Because in this place, getting lost isn't a mistake. It's a method. You don't need to hold on to direction, only attention. Let it be soft. Let it be curious. Let it be enough. So before you drift, know this. This isn't about sleep. Not really. Sleep is just the doorway. You are already inside. Now take your first step into the maze and consider this. Maybe you're not the one choosing to walk. Maybe you're the one being chosen by the thought that waits just around the bend. The paradox of free will. You sit in silence and decide, almost casually, to lift your hand, and so it rises. A simple act, a moment that whispers, you are in control. But behind that whisper, something strange stirs. What if the decision wasn't yours, not entirely? What if the thought that you chose was itself an echo, not a beginning? In the quiet corridors of neuroscience labs, a curious experiment unfolds. Electrodes trace the mind's impulses and catch something peculiar. Milliseconds before a person claims to make a choice, the brain has already acted. Neurons fire, a signal travels. The decision was already on its way before consciousness arrived. It's as if the brain decided first, and only later informed you. So I'm just watching myself choose? One voice wonders. Or maybe you're the last to know. The other replies with a soft chuckle. This gap between intention and awareness cracks open a question too vast to ignore. If the machinery of the brain begins before you say yes, then who exactly is the you that chooses? Are we passengers sitting in the back seat of our own thoughts, offered the illusion of steering while something deeper drives? Imagine a marionette. Its limbs sway gracefully on stage. It bows, it dances. But somewhere above, beyond the glow of the lights, strings twitch. And in a room beyond that, a hand moves. And perhaps beyond even that, there is no puppeteer, just patterns unfolding. If free will is a story we tell ourselves, then what becomes of guilt or praise? If you hurt someone and your neurons were always going to fire that way, are you still at fault? Or is responsibility simply a useful fiction, a structure to keep chaos at bay? Wait, if everything's already determined, the first voice asks, does that mean hope is fake too? Not fake, the second answers, just maybe not as independent as we'd like. Because here lies the twist. If everything is pre-written, then every breath, every stumble, every tear was also meant to be. And in that, perhaps, is a strange kind of peace. You aren't the sole author, but you are the one who feels the story, the one who lives it. You are not the hand that moves the wave, but you are the wave that knows it's rising. So what is identity then, if not the chooser? Perhaps it is the awareness that notices the choosing. Perhaps morality is not about control, but about presence. Maybe regret is the echo of watching the movie of your life and wishing the ending were softer. And hope? Maybe hope is the heart's refusal to stop watching, believing the next scene will matter, even if it was always meant to be. As the night deepens, the stars don't blink because we wish them to. They shine on a rhythm far older than our longing. And yet, we look up and call it beautiful. So maybe you don't need to be in control to belong to the moment. Then, who's really in charge? The first voice whispers, and the second voice replies gently, let's find out. Let's look behind the curtain together. Let us now peer into the screen behind the screen. The simulation hypothesis. The hum of your thoughts slows now, like the soft whir of a machine left on in the corner of a quiet room. You might not notice it at first, but it's there, and slowly, gently, it becomes the only sound, the only presence, like background code running underneath your reality. She whispered, have you ever had that feeling? Like everything is too precise, too perfect to be random? He nodded slowly. Like how every time I check the clock, it's a repeating number. 2:22, 3:33, as if someone wants me to notice. That's where the theory begins. Not in the lab or the lecture hall, but in that faint whisper of suspicion. The simulation hypothesis doesn't arrive like a loud proclamation. It slips in like a thought you're not sure was yours. Philosopher Nick Bostrom once laid it out plainly. If a civilization becomes advanced enough, it could run simulations of reality. Many of them, billions, If that's true, statistically, it's more likely we are inside one of those simulations than in the real universe. So, what does that make you? A player? A pixel? Or maybe just a well-written line of code echoing through a machine you'll never see? It's strange how the thought doesn't feel terrifying. Not here, in this soft hour of reflection. It feels freeing. If reality is programmed, then maybe there is a kindness in its consistency. Maybe the wind is set to always soothe, the sun always to warm, your memories coded with care. But then, she asked, what about my pain? Was that designed too? He looked out the window, then back at her. Maybe pain is part of the game. Maybe it's how the code knows you're alive. Every rule of physics you rely on, gravity, motion, time, it could all be the product of a vast design, an intentional pattern, like the artificial intelligence inside a story-rich video game that believes it has choice. It moves, it laughs, it fears deletion, yet its code is bound, defined, executed on command. And still, consciousness flickers. You feel love, you grieve, you hope. That thing that rises inside you despite no logical reason to. What if that's the glitch? Or maybe the most human line in your code? If you are being watched, perhaps it is not with judgment. Perhaps it is with curiosity, tenderness, like a gardener peering into a terrarium, admiring the little world that grows inside, wondering what will happen next. She asked, "Do you think there's someone out there, controlling it all?" He replied, "Maybe. Or maybe it's running on its own now, like a song playing long after the composer's gone to sleep. If consciousness is algorithm, it doesn't mean it's empty. In fact, it might mean it's even more precious, a fire lit not by accident, but on purpose. You are here, and whether made of atoms or code, you are feeling, and that alone might be the proof that you are real enough. The line between reality and dream? Perhaps it's thinner than we thought. Perhaps it's not a line at all, but a ripple, like silk falling into water. Let us now follow that ripple as it dissolves into the next thought. And if you drift away now, that's all right. You can return later. The maze will wait. The code is patient. Lucid dreams and false awakenings. There are moments, strange and slippery, when you open your eyes, and yet you haven't woken at all. The sheets feel real, the room familiar. The soft hum of the fan whispers against your skin, but something is off. The clock blinks the same time twice. The door won't open. Your voice catches in your throat. You think, I must be dreaming, but the sensation of awareness is so sharp, it mimics waking. Welcome to the haunting space between lucidity and illusion. Have you ever had one of those dreams? She asked, where you think you've woken up, but then something's weird, like the toothpaste tastes like metal? He chuckled. Yeah, I once brushed my teeth with a pencil for 5 minutes before I realized I was still asleep. Lucid dreams offer a strange sort of rebellion, a mind aware inside its own illusion. You realize you're dreaming, and suddenly you're weightless. You fly, morph, call forth memories like holograms. You speak with the dead, you touch the sky, and it feels more vivid than waking life ever has. But then something shifts. You wake up, or so you think. You sit in bed, stretch, breathe deep, but the room is slightly too perfect. Your phone won't turn on. The mirror shows something moving in the background. You're still dreaming. This is the trick of false awakenings. In these moments, the boundary between real and unreal dissolves like fog beneath a morning sun. If you can be so thoroughly convinced that you're awake inside a dream, how sure can you be about your waking life right now? What if this is just another layer? She asked, rubbing her temples as if trying to peel back the veil. What if we're living in one big lucid dream, thinking we've woken up to adulthood or purpose or love, but it's still just another illusion? He paused, then whispered, maybe every time we think we've figured life out, we've just stepped into another version of sleep. That's the real disquiet. The idea that clarity itself may be just a better dressed dream. Lucid dreams tempt us with control, but false awakenings remind us how easy it is to be deceived. And if our own minds can build these layers without our knowing, what does that say about the nature of our consciousness? Perhaps we are wanderers in an endless hallway of mirrors, always believing the next reflection is the real one. Think of all the times in your life when you thought you had woken up, emotionally, spiritually, intellectually. You thought you'd finally understood who you were, what you wanted, what truth was. But then life pulled back the curtain, and you saw it had been a stage all along. What you believed was freedom was another form of dreaming. In this quiet space between real and imagined, something stirs, a question that cannot be shaken. What if we never truly wake? What if the dreamer never finds the edge of the dream? And yet, maybe that's not something to fear. Maybe the beauty lies in trying to awaken. In each false start, each illusion shattered, we inch closer to a truth that doesn't need form, a knowing that cannot be proven, only felt. So as you lie there, eyes closed, thoughts fluttering, ask yourself gently, am I dreaming now? And if you are, would you even know? Let us now wander deeper into a question older than sleep. If the tree falls but no one hears, did it ever exist at all? The observer effect. Somewhere between silence and sleep, a question hums beneath your breath. Does the world still spin when you're not watching? It's a child's curiosity at first, innocent, even playful. But beneath that curiosity lies something deeper. In the realm of quantum physics, reality doesn't behave as you'd expect. Particles, those building blocks of everything, don't even pick a form until they're seen. They're not here or there, not this or that. They're like ideas unspoken, songs not yet sung, until something or someone pays attention. A quiet voice in the room says, "So, if I turn around, is the moon still there?" The other replies, not sarcastic, but softly intrigued, "Maybe it waits for you," like a stage that lights up only when you enter. And suddenly you realize how much power there might be in simply looking, in being aware. A particle becomes a place becomes a memory perhaps becomes you. You pause, you breathe, you notice. And that simple noticing weaves the universe around you like a cloak. The philosopher might say, to be is to be perceived. But what if the reverse is also true? To perceive is to be. Some evenings you've walked through a crowded street and felt invisible, like the world passed through you instead of around you. And yet, other times, a stranger's eyes caught yours, no words exchanged, and something changed. A subtle realignment, as if their gaze carved a place for you inside the moment. Maybe it's not just physics, maybe it's personal. You aren't simply in the universe, you are helping it unfold. A moth flutters at the edge of a lamp. A curtain stirs with the wind. And without your noticing, they are meaningless. But with your attention, the moth becomes a metaphor. The curtain becomes a curtain call. Your attention is a kind of creation. You hold more influence than you think, not through control, but through consciousness. One person whispers, "So if I stop watching, does the world vanish?" The reply floats in like a breeze. No. But something sacred might go unnoticed. And there it is, the quiet truth. You are not merely seeing reality. You are part of the seeing that makes reality real. Not the architect, not the god, but perhaps the candle inside the cathedral. Fragile, flickering, yet capable of illuminating the whole dome. What then is this flame within? This soft, wordless watcher that both sees and is seen. Stay here. Let that question rest beside you like a folded coat. No need to answer. Just feel its weight, its warmth. Because if the world waits to bloom under your gaze, then your presence is not small. It is sacred. And now, as your thoughts grow quieter, let the next question drift in with the gentleness of dusk. If your attention builds the world, then what truly are you? We now begin to dissolve into that mystery, where the self is not a shape, but a shimmer, where you don't need to know the answer to belong to the question. The illusion of the self. You wake up in the morning and think, here I am again. You brush your teeth, glance in the mirror, and recognize the face, your name, your memories, your likes and dislikes, all stitched together into a single, stable feeling. Me. This sense of self feels natural, intuitive, undeniable. But what if it isn't? Across centuries, Buddhist teachings have offered a radical challenge. The self you cling to is not real. Not in the way you think. There is no unchanging you behind the thoughts, no soul fixed like a stone. Instead, what you call you is more like a flame, flickering, shifting, never quite the same twice. Neuroscience joins the chorus. The brain builds identity from neural patterns and memory fragments, a looping narrative that feels whole but isn't. Even Western philosophers, David Hume, Derek Parfit, have stood on this cliff and admitted, I searched for the self and found nothing but impressions, stitched together by habit. So wait, one voice says in a quiet room. If there's no real self, then who's asking this question? The other voice chuckles softly. Maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the questioner is part of the illusion too. It's unsettling at first, like reaching for solid ground and finding mist. But there's beauty in this unraveling. If you are not a fixed identity, you are not trapped either. You are not your worst day, not the label they gave you, not even the role you've been rehearsing for years. You are the unfolding, the motion, the ripple in the river, never quite the same but always present. Think of the sky. The clouds pass, the light shifts, storms come and go, but the sky doesn't break. In the same way, consciousness is the canvas. Thoughts arise, identities take form, but nothing permanent stays. If you stop clutching to the idea of self, what remains is freedom, spaciousness, peace. So who suffers then? Who rejoices? Who decides? Maybe it's not a who, but a what. A flowing process, not a person. A candle burning, not a hand holding the flame. Maybe you are not the hero of the story. Maybe you are the story itself, told in breath, in silence, in the quiet choices made when no one's watching. Always rewriting itself, always dissolving. And as this moment fades into the next, ask yourself, not who am I, but what is this? Now let us gently release the grip on identity. Let the mirror blur. Let the eye soften. For in the next segment, we'll enter a world where truth itself dissolves the closer we look, where certainty fades and mystery breathes. The Ship of Theseus. The mind drifts to water now, slow, rippling water beneath an old ship. Wooden boards creak softly beneath its weight. This ship has sailed for years, carrying tales, storms, and salt. But over time, Every single plank has been replaced, not all at once, quietly, bit by bit. And yet, people still call it the same ship. Why? There's something oddly soothing about that idea, that we can change completely, piece by piece, and still be ourselves. Or at least, still be called ourselves. Hey, someone once asked me in a laundromat, folding a faded hoodie, do you think you're the same person you were 5 years ago? I said, I'm not even the same person I was this morning. She smiled. So, who's folding your laundry now? There's a warm eeriness in that question. Because deep down, we all feel some invisible thread tying it together, a self, a soul, a center. But science has no name for this thread. Your skin cells renew. Your bones replace their calcium. The memories you hold get re-encoded, subtly altered every time you recall them. Even your voice, your tone, your rhythm softens with each passing year. You are not the body you were born with. You are not the same neural map you had as a teenager. And yet here you are. A man once told me during a midnight walk, when my father died, I inherited his watch, but I had to change the band. Then the face cracked. Eventually, I replaced the whole thing. I still call it his watch, but really, it's not. He paused, eyes lost in the street lamp glow. Maybe I'm the same. Replaced, but still, somehow me. So where does the self reside, if not in parts? Not in bone or breath or thought? Maybe it doesn't reside at all. Maybe it's more like a melody that persists, even if the instruments change. Or a river that never holds the same water twice, but is still called by name. You could think of yourself as a story written on dissolving pages, or as a song hummed by different voices, but carrying the same tune. That's where the paradox blooms. If the ship of Theseus is rebuilt from new planks, and the old planks form another ship, which one is the real one? Perhaps both. Perhaps neither. And perhaps you are not a thing to be defined, but a motion to be felt. A continuity made of soft chaos and gentle pattern. A mystery too fluid for labels. A friend once asked in passing, if I started over somewhere new, with no past, would I still be me? He didn't expect an answer, just a silence deep enough to hold the question. So now, as your breath slows and the ship sails further out, into fog, into nothing, you may feel the echo of that same question in your chest. But you don't need to answer it. Just rest beside it. Let it rock you. Let the ship drift. And if you are not a fixed thing, then perhaps time itself is just another illusion waiting to be untied. Let us now bend it. Time dilation and the elastic moment. In a quiet room, a clock ticks, steady, predictable. But inside you, time doesn't move like that, does it? It stretches and folds, slows when fear grips your chest, disappears when laughter carries you away. What Einstein discovered in equations, you felt in your bones. Time, it turns out, is not a ruler etched in stone, but a ribbon, twisting, coiling, reacting to gravity and emotion alike. When you stood on the edge of something terrifying, perhaps a car crash, a breakup, or a fall, didn't time expand? Each second split into dozens, your senses sharpening, your awareness blooming into slow motion. But during a moment of awe, a sunset so impossibly pink, a child's first word, a kiss that stopped the world, wasn't it the opposite? Time seemed to vanish, like it had been trickling all along and then chose to disappear in reverence. Do you think time is real? She asks, voice soft, stirring the air between them. He smiles faintly. Depends. Real on a clock, sure. But in the heart? He taps his chest, completely unreliable. They sit at a kitchen table, sharing tea in silence, as outside the sun stains the sky gold. This isn't just an evening, it's a memory being born. Time here is thick, meaningful, slower than it should be. But it's not the seconds that matter, it's the weight those seconds carry. Science tells us time bends near mass, near black holes. It can stretch so dramatically that minutes on the event horizon equal years elsewhere. But you don't need a spaceship to feel that. All it takes is grief. Or falling in love. A simple goodbye can last a lifetime inside you. A blink of joy can feel like home for eternity. So what are we really measuring when we speak of time? Perhaps the ticking of the clock is only useful when we need to catch a train or make an appointment. But life itself? That moves on its own rhythm. Sometimes hurried, sometimes slow, always elastic. The mind doesn't keep time. It feels it. If eternity lives anywhere, he says, maybe it's in those seconds that feel like forever. She nods, not because she fully agrees, but because she knows exactly what he means. To feel time is to admit we're not just observers, we're participants. When you dwell in sorrow, the minutes crawl. When you dream, they fly. When you remember, they fold. Every second is not equal. Some carry the weight of years, some pass like air. And so we begin to question. If a moment can contain a universe, then why search for eternity in the stars? Why not in the breath you hold when something sacred happens? Why not in the glance exchanged between two souls who understand? Let us then slip between these seconds, not as if escaping time, but as if entering it more deeply. In doing so, we may find that time does not simply pass. It pools. It bends. It becomes meaning. And meaning, after all, might be the only kind of time worth remembering. The Memory Mirage. You close your eyes and a moment returns. A birthday, a streetlight, a voice saying your name. And it feels so vivid, like opening a drawer and finding a photograph untouched by time. But what if the drawer is lined not with film, but with fog? The mind doesn't hold memories. It paints them. Not on canvas, but on mist. Each time you reach for a moment, you don't retrieve it. You remake it. And what remakes it? Emotion, expectation, even silence. The past is not an archive, it's a theater. And every time you visit, the set is rebuilt, just slightly different. I remember him wearing a blue coat, she says. No, he replies, tilting his head with gentle amusement. It was gray. I bought it for him. They both pause, unsure, not of the coat, but of what the memory meant. And in that moment, you realize it's not about the color. It never was. Memory is not a courtroom where truth is measured. It's a bonfire at night where we gather for warmth, not accuracy. We sit around it and tell stories. And sometimes, to protect ourselves, we soften the endings or light up the darkest corners. That isn't deception, it's survival. Think of your earliest memory, not the one someone told you, the one you feel in your chest, a toy, a hallway, a breath. Are you sure it happened just like that? Or did your mind, needing comfort or coherence, build a story that felt true enough to hold? And if so, if each recollection is a reconstruction, what does that say about identity? A man walks into a cafe, searching the faces as if hoping for recognition. He orders something he doesn't usually drink, sits by the window he never chooses. Why? Maybe he's chasing a version of himself that once lived in this scene. Maybe he's trying to remember, or trying to be remembered. When memory is flexible, so are you. You are not the sum of events. You are the act of remembering them, sculpting yourself in soft clay, moment after moment, molding your narrative to fit the shape of who you wish to be. or who you can bear to be. So if your past changes each time you visit it, are you really looking backward? Or are you simply looking inward, brushing dust from the mirror, hoping to catch a glimpse? And what of forgiveness? If we forget details or replace pain with understanding, is that healing or editing? Maybe it's both. Maybe growth isn't about accuracy, but mercy. A soft voice from across the room asks, "Do you remember that time we danced in the kitchen?" You smile, even if you don't. You answer, "Yes." And somehow, that answer makes it real. Let it be known, memory is not a vault, but a veil. It changes color under different lights. It echoes more than it speaks. And yet, from this fragile mist, we craft something durable, something we call identity. As you drift deeper now, feel the layers fold. Moments you once clung to lose their edges. They soften, like cloth in water. There's no need to grasp. Let them float. Because maybe your story isn't something you remember. It's something you're always in the process of writing. And that is beautiful. Now let us turn gently from the soft clay of the past and ask something even deeper. If memory can be rewritten, then what else? What else might we be dreaming into truth? Could even death be something more flexible than we feared? Something less final than we believed? The death that never arrives. We speak of death like it's a destination, a final door that slams shut. But what if death is not a wall, but a veil? A thin, trembling surface we mistake for an ending because we cannot see what lies beyond it. In the gentle hush of midnight thoughts, the idea of consciousness begins to soften. It stops looking like a flame that flickers out and starts to resemble a vibration, something that shifts its tone rather than ceasing altogether. A song doesn't disappear just because the singer walks away. The melody lingers. Maybe you are not the voice, but the echo that keeps singing. "Do you think we vanish completely when we die?" she asks, looking at the ceiling like it might answer back. He pauses before speaking, as if balancing on the edge of silence. "Number, I think we just change stations, like tuning an old radio. Different frequency, same signal." This is where certain theories, scientific and spiritual, begin to blur. Some physicists explore the idea of non-local consciousness, where awareness isn't trapped inside the brain, but distributed like light, flowing through a network too vast to be bound by flesh and bone. What ends then may not be the viewer, but the frame through which the view was known. Death, in this sense, becomes less like closing a book and more like flipping to the next chapter in a story without page numbers. If this is true, then life itself is not a straight path with a clear end, but a rhythm, a modulation of awareness, a melody that pauses only to shift key. What if what we call dying is merely a soft decrescendo, a slowing of tempo, before the next crescendo rises unseen? Perhaps your soul doesn't disappear, it simply changes its pattern, just as water becomes mist or day slips into dusk. Is that why we feel so much in dreams? She wonders aloud, her voice barely a whisper now. Like something is remembering us, from somewhere we haven't gone yet? Maybe, he says, or maybe dreams are the parts of us that already left, coming back to remind us the story isn't over. And in that silence, neither speaks, because the most honest thoughts are often wordless. They echo, not in sound, but in presence. So tonight, if fear rises like a wave in your chest, let it pass. Let it crest and fall, like music you don't yet understand. What ends may not truly end. It may just change shape, and what waits on the other side may not be emptiness, but continuation, not darkness, but a quiet crescendo too vast to fit inside the notes of this life. Let us now breathe into this silence and follow the music deeper into the tunnels of paradox that twist without end. The Infinite Hotel Paradox. There's a hotel that never runs out of space. Every room is full, and yet, somehow, a new guest always finds a key. How is that possible? You shift one person down, one room over, and the whole place stretches like a breath taken in reverse. Welcome to Hilbert's Hotel, a place where infinity folds politely, rearranges itself, and never turns anyone away. But this isn't just mathematics. It's a mirror of the mind, a metaphor not for numbers, but for memory, for identity, for the way we endlessly host new thoughts, feelings, hopes, regrets, without ever truly running out of room. And perhaps, like this strange hotel, we believe we're at capacity. We say, "I'm full. I can't take more." But then a memory knocks, and we make space. Two strangers pass in a quiet hallway. "Funny," one says, glancing at the numbered doors. "I thought this place was fully booked." The other smiles without looking back. "It is. And yet you're here." That's the paradox, the impossibility that feels like life. You don't forget, you reorganize, you don't erase, you shift. Grief doesn't leave, joy doesn't replace it. They move over, like guests in adjoining rooms, nodding quietly through paper-thin walls. What happens, though, when the hotel never stops filling? When stories keep arriving without end? At first, you are amazed at your own capacity, then overwhelmed by it, and slowly, you begin to wonder, can meaning survive when nothing ever ends? Because a moment means something when it is rare. But when every hallway echoes with infinite versions of yourself, laughing, crying, wanting, remembering, how do you know which voice is real, or if real even matters? Maybe this is why we forget, why dreams blur, why silence feels sacred, because even infinity needs stillness to be seen. "You ever get the feeling?" one of the guests asks softly, staring at a hallway that curves out of sight, "that no matter how far you walk, the room you need is always just one door away?" A pause, a gentle laugh. "That's why I stopped searching," the other replies. "Now I just wait and listen." So tonight, let yourself become that quiet corridor. Let thoughts check in and out without judgment. Let memories pass through, unpack their bags, and vanish like mist. You don't need to hold them all. You just need to hold still. And if sleep gently takes you now, that's okay. You can always return. The hotel is infinite. Now, let us descend from infinite hotels into the strange corridors where cause and effect trade places. The Bootstrap Paradox. Can something exist without ever being created? Not metaphorically, but literally, without an origin point. Imagine a circle, flawless and unbroken. Now imagine knowledge caught inside that loop, never written, never invented, just endlessly passed forward and backward through time. That is the unsettling beauty of the Bootstrap Paradox. Picture this. A time traveler stumbles upon an old, weathered book tucked away in a forgotten corner of a library. The book contains groundbreaking theories, deep insights, and poetic brilliance. Moved by its wisdom, the traveler memorizes its contents, then journeys back in time. There, he publishes the same book under his own name. Decades pass, and in the future, the traveler discovers it again. The very same book that inspired him in the first place. But here's the riddle. Who actually wrote it? No one. The book exists within a perfect loop, a closed circuit of cause and effect. It was never created. It only is. Like a melody without a composer, or a dream without a dreamer, its origin dissolves when you try to trace it. The past gives birth to the future, and the future births the past. This isn't just a quirky sci-fi story. It raises questions that reach far deeper than timelines. If time can fold, then what else can? What about art? What about genius? What about you? Let's say a painter dreams of a scene she's never seen, yet that scene already exists in another painting from a forgotten century. She recreates it, unknowingly pulling it from a memory that was never hers. Or a young man writes a song that matches, note for note, a melody his grandfather once heard but never recorded. Where did these things come from? Did they arise from within, or echo from somewhere else? Maybe identity works this way too. Maybe parts of you are echoes, not origins. Maybe your greatest thoughts, your deepest beliefs were never truly born inside you. Maybe they traveled through language, through time, through generations of forgotten stories, and simply landed in you. Do you think I actually invented this idea? One voice asks in the dark. Maybe not. Another answers softly. Maybe you remembered it from a future that hasn't happened yet. The paradox plays with our deepest assumptions, that things begin, that they must be caused. But the loop laughs at our linear logic. Some things might not have beginnings at all. Some things, like rivers in a circle, simply flow. So when you pick up a thought that feels strangely familiar, when you write something that feels older than you, when you dream of a place you've never seen, pause. It might not be your creation. It might be your transmission. Maybe you are not just a person, but a portal. Let us step now into another kind of echo, not through time, but across selves. When you become someone else, who remains? The mirror self. It begins with a moment so subtle you could miss it. The glance into a shop window, late at night. A flash of recognition, not of yourself, but of something too perfect. A version of you standing just a second too still. The mirror doesn't lie, but it doesn't tell the whole truth either. We build ourselves through contrast, through the difference between us and not us, through rejection, through desire. But the mirror self, the version of you that does everything just as you do, doesn't offer contrast. It offers mimicry, flawless duplication, that strange sense that someone else could be living your life in perfect sync, down to the way your breath rises when no one's watching. Do you ever feel, one voice murmurs in the hush of a night ride, like you're rehearsing yourself for someone else's eyes? Yeah, comes the soft reply. Like I'm not living, just reflecting. In love, in friendship, even in brief encounters, we often long for someone who gets us, who mirrors our values, our rhythm, our wounds. And when we find them, there's comfort, but also something eerie. When someone reflects you too exactly, it stops feeling like resonance and starts feeling like a copy. Or worse, a mask you didn't know you wore. Maybe it's because perfect agreement threatens to erase the space where individuality grows. If there's no dissonance, there's no need to speak, no need to choose. You dissolve into reflection. And that's the hidden tension. The comfort of sameness held tightly against the quiet fear of disappearing into it. There's a moment in every conversation when you pause, unsure who's shaping the silence, you or the other. That moment sits like fog on a lake, soft but disorienting. Is this connection or repetition? You sip your tea. She finishes your sentence. You laugh. And so does he before the joke lands. It feels good, but something in your bones stays alert, watching for the echo that doesn't belong to your voice. And what if this mirror isn't in front of you, but inside you? A version of self that tracks every move, not to judge, but to replicate. You say, I should quit. And somewhere inside, another version says, yes, but later. You feel torn, but only because you are already too. Over time, we start to blur. You can't tell if your opinion is yours or borrowed, if your reaction is true or rehearsed. Identity becomes a hall of mirrors, each reflection convincing, but none of them whole. And that's the beauty too, because the mirror self can help you see what you've avoided. Your strengths, repeated. Your flaws, illuminated. A secret rehearsal space where you confront yourself again and again until the performance becomes real. But hold this gently. Because a mirror can only reflect the surface. It can never show you the pulse beneath the skin, the one that beats alone, even when you're surrounded. So if, tonight, you feel the tug of recognition too strong, if you dream of someone living your life just as you would, don't panic. Breathe. Let the thought pass through you, like water around a stone. You are not just your reflection. You are the space between the mirrors, too. And now, if mirrors already feel too human, what happens when you're copied before you're even born? Let us drift softly into the mystery of the twin who was never supposed to leave. The Vanishing Twin. Do you ever feel like there's something inside you that doesn't belong to you, but still feels like home? There's a strange hush that falls over the womb long before a cry ever breaks the air. In that quiet, mysterious place, there are stories that begin and end before we ever take our first breath. One of those stories is the Vanishing Twin. It's not science fiction, it's biology. A real phenomenon where one embryo in a womb simply disappears, absorbed into the other, as if the body made a quiet, brutal decision. Only one of you gets to continue, and yet the one who stays doesn't stay alone. Sometimes a shadow remains, not in the light, but beneath the skin, a calcified bone, a tooth without a mouth, DNA that doesn't quite match. Tiny pieces of a person who never made it into the world, but didn't entirely leave either. You could be living your life with someone else's pieces tucked into your body, unseen, unspoken, unexplained, and perhaps, in a way, still alive. Two friends sit beneath a soft porch light. One stirs her coffee and says, "Sometimes I feel like I'm being pulled in two directions at once." Her friend chuckles. "That's just life, right?" But she doesn't laugh. "No, I mean it. Like, there's someone inside me who wants something different. I can't explain it." There's a pause. Then the other says quietly, "Maybe part of you isn't really you. This isn't just about biology. It becomes metaphor. Maybe all of us carry a twin, one who never made it to the surface, but still whispers through our cravings, our terrors, our strange strengths. A shadow self who never lived, yet helped shape the one who did. What if your brilliance in music, or your deep unease in crowds, or the dreams that don't feel like yours, belong to the other? There's something haunting in that thought, that some of who we are may be inherited not from genetics or upbringing, but from an echo that was never meant to remain. Like notes from a song never played, still vibrating inside the instrument. The Vanishing Twin may be more than a lost sibling. It may be a part of you that was never meant to grow, but never really left. And if that's true, what else can vanish within you? Not by death, but by dispersion. What happens when your sense of self breaks apart across years, cities, and choices? Can you disappear without ever dying? just by letting too many parts of yourself be scattered across people, regrets, and timelines. Let us now ask gently, if a twin can vanish inside the body, can you vanish inside a life? What truly remains when no part of you stays in one place? Shh. Don't answer yet. Let's drift into that question, like a breath dissolving into fog. The maze continues. The Teleportation Paradox. The room hums with a low pulse, like breath beneath the floor. A soft voice, not quite yours, not quite anyone's, asks a question that doesn't land like thunder, but like a feather brushing the edge of sleep. If you vanished in one place and reappeared in another, are you still you? A teleportation device, so elegant in concept. Step inside. A hum, a flicker, a light. Your body is scanned down to the molecule, disassembled and reassembled thousands of miles away, let's say, on Mars. The you that stepped in is gone. What steps out is flawless. The same eyes, the same voice, the same memory of your dog's bark, your grandmother's kitchen. But is that memory yours, or just something programmed into atoms that don't know they're pretending? Hey, a man at the train station turns to a woman beside him, not taking his eyes off the blinking arrivals board. Do you think you'd still be you if everything about you was rebuilt? She doesn't look surprised by the question. Depends who's asking. The version of me before heartbreak wouldn't even recognize this one. He chuckles, but doesn't answer. The board flips again. Maybe the self is not a constant flame, but a flickering projection, frame by frame, like a film strip we mistake for real life. Each new scene seamless enough that we never see the cut. If you are broken down, atom by atom, and then built back up again, what does that mean for continuity? Is identity the shape we see in water just before it ripples? Perhaps what endures isn't the material, but the motion, the rhythm, the illusion that the melody never stops playing. Sometimes in quiet moments between thoughts, you can almost feel it, that tremble between who you were yesterday and who's brushing your teeth this morning. Slightly different, slightly shifted, still calling itself me. A boy in a coffee shop asks for the window seat with a gentle tap on the table. Would you mind? I always sit here when I'm trying to remember who I was last week. The older man smiles. Funny, I'm here trying to forget who I was last year. They trade no names, only the shared silence of those rebuilding themselves in public. So maybe we are not statues, fixed in identity and structure, but rivers, flowing, looping, carried by gravity and memory. Every time we think we've found a solid bank to stand on, the current shifts again. And if that's the case, who gets to say which version of you is real? The one before the trauma? After the forgiveness? The one who left, or the one who returned? It's like chasing a reflection on a lake's surface. You can see it, clear as anything. But reach for it, and your hand touches only ripples. Let this idea rest beside you now, gently. No need to solve it. Let it breathe its question into your sleep. Are you the one who travels, or the one who arrives? And as the thought dissolves like mist, let us now float with this illusion into the paradox where knowing more somehow makes us know less. The knowledge paradox. It begins innocently, perhaps with a book, a lesson, or a sudden curiosity that pulls you inward. You learn a fact, then another, and with each new thread, the tapestry of the world appears to widen. But just as your mind stretches, something unsettling whispers at the edges. You don't know nearly as much as you thought. There's a strange trick of the human mind. Those who know the least often feel the most certain. This is no insult, just a pattern, well documented and deeply humbling. Psychologists call it the Dunning-Kruger effect, and it plays out across fields, disciplines, and daily life. At the summit of unawareness, people brim with confidence, but climb higher, gain actual insight, and that confidence falters. Why? Because now you see the vastness of what you don't know. The map is no longer filled in, it becomes mostly blank, bordered with possibility and fog. You ever notice, one voice murmurs in a quiet cafe, that the more you learn, the more you feel like a beginner? Totally, the other replies, stirring a lukewarm cup. Back when I barely knew anything about philosophy, I thought I had it all figured out. Same. Now I read just one page of Kant and feel like I'm drowning. A shared laugh. Not bitter, just soft, accepting. This paradox isn't meant to discourage. Quite the opposite. It's an invitation to humility, to awe. Imagine a child staring at the night sky. At first they might count the stars, but then they ask what lies beyond them, and beyond that, and still further beyond. Knowledge is not a line, it is a spiral, and with every turn, it both sharpens and dissolves. So where does that leave us? If every answer breeds more questions, then perhaps wisdom is not about arrival, but about learning to live mid-journey. Maybe it's not about mastering the truth, but learning how to sit beside it, quietly, without clenching. There is a gentle peace in this letting go, a kind of freedom. You don't have to know everything. You're not broken for doubting. In fact, maybe that's the truest form of knowledge, the grace to say, I don't know, and mean it without fear. Let us now walk deeper into the places where knowing meets its edge, where logic attempts to map the infinite, and mathematics dares to touch the void. Gödel's Incompleteness Theorem. There's a kind of silence that falls, not from absence, but from awe, the kind of stillness that settles over the mind when it meets a wall it cannot climb. And in the year 1931, Kurt Gödel quietly placed one such wall in front of mathematics itself. He didn't build it out of bricks, he revealed it from within. A proof so delicate yet so disruptive, it murmured, inside every consistent system of logic, there are true things that cannot be proven by that system alone. It's like trying to draw a perfect circle with just a ruler, or trying to describe the taste of honey using only numbers. No matter how precise you get, something essential slips through the cracks. I thought math was supposed to be complete, one voice says in the distance, half asleep, half curious. The reply is a soft chuckle. It was, until it looked in the mirror and realized it couldn't explain its own reflection. We often think of knowledge as a ladder. Climb high enough and you'll see everything. But Gödel turned that idea sideways. What if the ladder never ends? And worse, what if the last rungs are made of mist? So you sit quietly, sipping lukewarm tea in the corner of a quiet room, thinking about the things you feel but can't explain. That longing that visits without knocking. That memory that seems older than you. That pattern in the clouds you're sure you've seen before. They say the brain is the most complex structure in the known universe. And yet, it's using itself to understand itself, like a book trying to read its own spine, like a candle illuminating its own shadow. Someone once said over a late-night walk, "It's strange, isn't it, that the more I learn about myself, the more I realize there's a part of me I'll never meet." Like a secret twin, the other answered, that lives behind your thoughts. Perhaps Gödel wasn't just talking about numbers. Perhaps he was whispering about us, that there are truths inside you, undeniably true, but unreachable through explanation. A sorrow you can't name, a joy that catches in your throat, a certainty that lives in your bones, but not in your words. You don't have to solve everything to rest. You don't have to explain everything to believe it's real. As your breath softens, let that thought settle in your chest, like a feather on water, that some truths are too deep for logic, too alive for math. They hum beneath your thoughts, like a note you can feel but never sing. And if you ever feel lost in questions that loop without exit, know that you're not broken. You're simply brushing against the outer skin of a truth too big to hold. Let that comfort you. Let it hold the part of you that needs no proof. Because now, we move from logic to something just as elusive, just as immeasurable. Let us walk toward the next riddle, the one that lives not in equations, but in the silent pulse between two hearts. Let us now speak softly of love. The paradox of intimacy. Even the most tender gaze cannot map the landscape of another's soul. You may hold someone, breathe beside them, laugh at the same moment, and still never fully know the rhythm of their heartbeat when they are silent. That is the paradox of intimacy. The closer we come to someone, the more we long to dissolve the distance. Yet something always remains just beyond our grasp, a secret corner, a silent history, a feeling that has no name. "Do you ever feel like I don't really see you?" she asked one evening, eyes flickering like candlelight. He looked at her for a long time before replying, "I think maybe the truest love is knowing I never fully will, but wanting to try anyway." We are layered beings, shifting moods, old wounds, invisible hopes folded deep into our emotional architecture. And the people we love, they are just as unknowable despite their smiles, their routines, their whispered confessions under tired night skies. Love promises closeness, but full understanding might be an illusion. A beautiful one, like trying to drink the sky by holding a mirror. This doesn't mean love is doomed to fall short. On the contrary, it suggests that love isn't about unraveling someone completely. It's about approaching them with reverence, like visiting a sacred place and knowing that some doors are not yours to open. Maybe it's not about knowing every thought, but standing quietly at the edge of their mystery and choosing not to walk away. "I used to think love was about becoming one," he said softly, watching the steam rise from his cup. "Now I think it's more like a dance." She nodded. Yes, two people moving together, but not stepping on each other. Some things cannot be said, some emotions cannot be translated into language, but in the space between what is spoken and what is felt, love blooms. The silence isn't empty. It's where the sacredness lives. Maybe the beauty of intimacy isn't in total merging, but in the continued reaching. The ongoing choice to stay curious, to listen, to ask, even when you've heard the answer before. So if you've ever felt distant from someone you adore, know this: you're not failing. You're human. You're witnessing the grand truth that love isn't the destruction of boundaries, but the gentle brushing against them, again and again, in awe. And now, let us turn the mirror slightly, not toward the ones we cherish, but toward ourselves. Can we ever truly see who we are? Or do we remain in some essential way, mysterious even to ourselves? The blind spot. There's a place in your vision where the world disappears. It's not broken, it's just missing. The brain quietly paints over it, a patch of nothing, smoothed into something, and you've never noticed. Now, consider this. What if the same thing happens inside your mind? A woman sits at a bus stop, tapping her shoe in rhythm. She tells herself she's late because of traffic. But deep down, there's a tension she won't name, something she won't look at directly. And just like that, her psyche brushes paint over the hole. The picture remains whole. But is it true? Have you ever forgotten something you were never supposed to forget? A man once asked this on a park bench, out of nowhere, to no one in particular. The other person beside him paused, thought, then answered, "I think I forgot how angry I was. Not at someone else, but at me. I just stopped noticing." Our minds are artists, merciful sometimes, deceptive often. They patch, they smooth, they gloss over the cracks until we believe the story was always seamless. You believe your reasons are pure. You believe your memories are real. You believe you are the sum of what you remember. But maybe you're also the sum of what you've forgotten. There is a kind of blindness not behind the eyes, but behind the soul. Not darkness, but absence. So well hidden, it becomes background. An old fear you renamed as caution. A lost hope repainted as wisdom. A failure you call fate. And here's the unsettling question. If you never notice the blind spot, how do you know what's not there? Self-awareness, then, might not be about what we see. It may be the slow, gentle trust in what we've missed. The courage to admit that some parts of us, perhaps the most important, are shadows on the wall, not the source of the light. There's a quiet man in a library who always chooses the table by the emergency exit. When asked why, he simply says, "It makes me feel less trapped." No one told him he was trapped, but something in him decided long ago to stay near an escape, a blind spot filled in not with vision, but with need. Tonight, as your body settles deeper, ask yourself this: what stories do I tell because silence is too hard to hold? What patchwork has my mind stitched so tightly I forgot there was ever a tear? Let the weight of that question soften, not to answer it, but to float with it. Let it cradle you, like a lullaby hummed in a language you've half forgotten. There is no shame in not knowing, only a quiet grace in noticing where the knowing ends. And so, we drift gently onward, into a place where your story is no longer yours alone, where self dissolves like salt in water, and identity becomes something collective, vaporous, and shared. Let's step softly into that mist, together. The Ship of Mind. You sit quietly at night, trying to find your center, but the silence is not truly silent. A voice rises inside, a familiar one, but whose is it really? Your mother's warning, your teacher's praise, a story your grandfather once told by candlelight, even the language you use to shape your private thoughts. Where did it come from? Not you, not entirely. Like a ship made of wood from many lands, your mind sails with parts you did not build. Do you ever wonder, she asked softly, stirring her tea, if your thoughts are truly your own? He looked up from his book, brow furrowed. All the time. I mean, even this conversation. Aren't we just rearranging things we've heard before? Exactly, she said, a small smile playing at the corner of her lips. It's like we're patching together a quilt made of scraps handed down. Culture paints the frame. Language supplies the canvas. Memory adds the texture. Your beliefs are shaped by headlines you didn't write, music you didn't compose, phrases passed through generations like heirlooms. The rules you follow, the lines you do not cross, are often drawn by voices long gone. So where, then, is the original you? Is there such a thing? Maybe the self is not a seed growing in isolation, but a harbor filled with boats from every port. You are not the creator of the ship. You are the captain learning to steer it. And the wood, the sails, the ropes, They were all gifted by others. It changes something, doesn't it? The way you see solitude. Maybe you were never truly alone. Maybe what you call inner voice is actually a quiet chorus of voices you've loved, feared, studied, or forgotten. What if connection is not an outside act, but the very fabric of your being? The more you isolate, the more you're really just drifting into the shared echoes of others. He glanced at her again. So, if we're made of borrowed parts, what's left that's truly ours? She paused, letting the warmth from her cup rise like a fog between them. The way we arrange them, the song we hum as we sail, maybe that's our fingerprint. And so, the ship of mind continues, planks creaking with ancient truths, sails catching winds from 1,000 stories. But its journey is uniquely yours, not because you built it from nothing, but because you sail it now, in this very moment. Let us now lean into this gentle contradiction, not seeking solid land, but drifting peacefully through the echoing chambers of thought, where the journey itself is more real than any destination. The echo chamber. A single sound caught between canyon walls repeats itself. Louder, clearer, but never new. That's how thoughts can behave in closed spaces, especially the ones we think are wide open. You scroll, you click, you nod. Agreement feels like safety. But is it growth? Echo chambers don't always shout. Sometimes they whisper your name in just the right tone. You're right. They don't get it. You've always known. And slowly, your ideas stop changing clothes. They wear the same familiar coat, even when the seasons shift. There's comfort in being surrounded by familiar notes, but comfort can also be a kind of sleepwalking. Two men sit at a quiet cafe. One stirs his coffee absent-mindedly. "You know," he says, "I started following this forum that agrees with everything I think." His friend tilts his head, half amused. "Sounds like you're just echoing yourself in high definition." There's a pause. "Maybe?" The first man shrugs. "But it feels good." "Sure," his friend replies, "but so does eating only dessert." When you live in repetition, the loop begins to feel like a map. Every retweet, every memory, every conversation that mirrors your own thoughts. None of it challenges the terrain. It only decorates the same route with brighter lights. But new ideas don't shout over the old ones. They often arrive dressed in discomfort, quietly questioning the melody that plays on repeat. It's not just digital spaces. Your memory has its own ecosystem. Recalling a moment reinforces it, alters it, polishes it until it shines, not always with accuracy, but with emotional resonance. You start to believe not because it's true, but because it's repeated. The loop feeds itself like a snake mistaking its own tail for food. Sometimes, the greatest illusion isn't disagreement. It's agreement that never gets tested. A woman enters a bookstore, then freezes. She whispers to the clerk, "I'm looking for a book that doesn't agree with me." The clerk smiles, then gestures to the philosophy shelf. They all argue. Pick the one that makes you slightly uncomfortable. She laughs. "That's exactly what I was afraid of." He nods. "Then it's probably the one you need." Maybe the thoughts you trust the most are the ones that have echoed the longest. But age doesn't equal wisdom. Repetition is not revelation. And what you hear in the chamber isn't always the truth. It's just the sound that made it back to you. So how do you know if you're looping or listening? The answer might lie in silence. Not passive silence, but active space. The kind where disagreement lives, where confusion breathes, where you wait before you nod. Truth doesn't always shout from a mountaintop. Sometimes it knocks once, then waits for you to stop talking. Let us now lean into that waiting, not to fill the silence, but to meet it, gently, curiously, as if it holds a door not yet opened, because beneath the last echo, something else may live, something unsaid, something new, and perhaps tonight, it's finally your turn to hear it. The sound of silence. There is a kind of silence that doesn't feel like absence at all. It feels like presence, dense, invisible, alive. Not the silence of an empty room or the end of a conversation, but the kind that hums in the space between two breaths, between two thoughts. The kind that cradles meaning the way a night sky holds stars. Have you ever sat in silence so deep it felt like something was listening back? Two people walk under the stars. One speaks softly. "Why do I feel closer to you when we're not saying anything?" The other smiles. Because silence lets everything else speak. In music, silence is the pause that gives rhythm. Without it, there's no contrast, no space for sound to breathe. The rests in a melody hold more power than we realize. They are not nothing. They are intentional. In conversation, a pause before answering can carry more emotion than the answer itself. A sigh, a stillness, a look. Silence is its own language. It doesn't interrupt, it invites. And in thought, in the private chambers of the mind, silence is the blank canvas where insights sketch themselves into view. The more cluttered our inner world becomes, the less space there is for those quiet revelations to appear. Yet we chase answers in noise. We fill every moment with music, podcasts, updates, voices. But maybe the truth doesn't compete with all that. Maybe it sits patiently, like a candle in a cave, waiting for the echoes to fade so it can be seen. "What if?" one of the walkers whispers again. "We've been mistaking silence for loneliness." The other stops. "And what if the thing we're searching for has been trying to reach us through stillness?" There's a strange kind of intimacy in silence, a closeness that doesn't need to be explained or resolved. It's where we come face to face with what's unresolved inside ourselves. No distractions, no pretenses, just the raw presence of being. Sometimes, the only way to hear the truth is to become quiet enough for it to arrive, not in shouts, not in certainty, but in the gentle hush of awareness. Silence doesn't erase, it reveals. It doesn't isolate, it connects. It allows the soul, long buried beneath the weight of daily thoughts, to emerge and speak. And what it says is often not new information, but old understanding. Something we've always known, but forgotten. So tonight, let us not resist the silence. Let us walk with it, like a familiar companion. Let us allow it to teach, to heal, to unfold something ancient within us. For in the stillness, perhaps we are not alone. Perhaps we are simply, finally listening. Now, follow that whisper, not forward, but backward. Not into the self you know, but into a memory that doesn't belong to you alone. One carried by every living mind. A memory that echoes not in sound, but in silence. Genetic memory. It begins as a faint discomfort, a shiver when there's no cold, a hesitation with no threat. You pause, but cannot explain why. And that's where it starts. Can you remember something you never lived? Not a dream, not a story you were told, but a feeling so familiar it seems to belong. You've never been in that forest, but you flinch at its shadows. You've never known that voice, but your breath catches when you hear it. A young man sits in a quiet library, his hand resting on an old journal he found by chance. He turns a brittle page and reads a name that stirs something inside him. Not recognition, but ache. His grandmother's voice, long gone, used to hum a tune when no one listened, and here, Among the notes and ink stains, the tune is scribbled before she was born. That's the strange beauty of epigenetics. Mice conditioned to fear a scent never told their story, but their pups remembered. The scent still made their little bodies jolt, as if echo could be inherited, as if warning could be written in bone. So, if I'm terrified of deep water and I've never nearly drowned, where did that come from? One voice asks gently, almost as if unsure it wants an answer. Maybe it came from someone who did, the other replies, and they survived, so that you could. Sometimes we call it instinct, sometimes déjà vu. But what if it's more? A whisper from those who shaped you, not through words, but through experience written into the thread of your being. The anxiety you carry may not be yours to blame. The longing you feel may not be yours to explain. You didn't choose the melody, but it plays in you. A woman once told her daughter, "You're always so careful, as if you've been punished for making a mistake, yet no one's ever scolded you that way." Her daughter didn't answer, but she dreamt of a great-grandmother she never met, whose life was built on walking tightropes, fearing every misstep. Even our silences might be inherited. So what, then, is identity? Not just a name or a body or a timeline of choices, but a living manuscript, mid-sentence. You were not born at the beginning. You are a chapter, a breath in a story that started long before you first cried, and may echo long after you're gone. There's something oddly comforting about that even in your loneliest moments, you're never truly alone. You are the fingerprint of survival, the echo of someone's hope, the reason someone once endured. A pause now, a gentle breath, and in that quiet, you might feel it. A trace of memory not your own, resting gently in your chest like a folded letter, unopened, but still addressed to you. Let us now wander further, into the realm where your own body may not be entirely you, where self blurs into history, and history hums in the rhythm of your breath. The Microbiome Mirror. You are not alone. Not really. Even when you close your eyes and breathe in stillness, a teeming world hums inside you. An unseen jungle, ancient and alive. Your body is home to trillions of microorganisms, each one carrying out its quiet work like background music you've never noticed. In fact, they outnumber your human cells. For every cell that says you, there are more that whisper something else entirely. In your gut alone lives a thriving metropolis of bacteria. They digest your food, make vitamins you need, regulate your immune system, and, more surprisingly, may even sway your moods. Recent studies suggest these microscopic creatures can influence depression, anxiety, even cravings. Isn't it strange to think that a microbe might be the one nudging you toward chocolate at midnight? So, you're saying the bacteria might control our feelings. Not control, maybe, but influence, like background actors shaping the mood of the scene. This raises a more intimate question. Who or what are you? If your emotions and decisions can be subtly bent by the invisible residents in your gut, are you still the author of your story? Or are you the stage on which millions perform? Identity begins to blur. We often say, "my body," as though it's a possession, a tool. But what if it's more like a garden? You don't own the garden, you tend it. And sometimes it grows things you didn't plant. Scientists call it the microbiome, but in a way it's more poetic than technical. It's a mirror, a microbial mirror, reflecting back how you eat, how you live, what you feel. Change your diet, and your microbes shift. Move to a new country, and they adapt. They are you, but they're not you. They are the quiet guests that rewrite the script of who you think you are. Do you think this means we're not really individuals? Maybe it means we never were. Maybe we're ecosystems pretending to be people. If you're a symphony, then identity is the song, one that keeps changing tempo as players enter and exit, tuning and retuning. You are not a single note, but the evolving music of trillions dancing under skin. And if that's true, then perhaps the line between host and hosted dissolves. Maybe the body is not a temple, but a festival, not a fortress, but a field where ancient forms of life still whisper through your bloodstream, shaping every moment from the inside out. Let us now step softly into a deeper riddle, one older than microbiology, more haunting than any microscope can reveal. If your mind is a chorus, then do you dream these thoughts? Or are you yourself being dreamed? The dreamer and the dreamed. There's a story, older than time, yet whispered across ages in the stillest hours of night. A man once slept, and in that sleep, he dreamt he was a butterfly. His wings brushed soft winds, he danced in light. And when he awoke, something stayed with him. Not the dream, but the doubt. Was he a man who dreamt of being a butterfly? Or a butterfly now dreaming he is a man? You may think it's just a poetic riddle, but it clings, doesn't it? Soft as silk, yet heavier than truth. What if you, too, are not the solid you think you are? What if every time you blink, the scene shifts just slightly, and you're not waking, you're drifting? I had the strangest feeling earlier, someone says, while stirring sugar into tea. Like I had already lived that moment. The breeze, the smell of lemon, even your words. It was all too familiar. Their friend leans in, half amused. You mean déjà vu? Or maybe the universe just glitched a bit. But neither laughs, because some questions don't ask to be answered. They simply settle into the silence, like fog curling into a valley. Perhaps identity isn't a place you return to, it's a wave you ride. One moment you are the rider, certain and grounded. The next, you dissolve into the tide, unsure if you steer or are steered. What if you are not the dreamer or the dreamed, but the dream itself? A process unfolding, a candle flickering, a dance without a dancer. There's something strangely freeing about that. Not having to be fixed, not having to hold a shape. You could be 1,000 roles in a day. A child in the morning light, a stranger in a grocery store line, a lover, a listener, a shadow that briefly touches someone else's path, then moves on. And yet, even in this fluidity, something within you watches, quietly, constantly, not naming, not judging, just witnessing. I don't know who I am anymore, someone says at a bus stop, eyes tracing the cracks in the sidewalk. But maybe that's okay. Maybe I was never meant to stay the same. A stranger nearby, not quite listening, nods anyway, as if that nod was an answer. As if some part of us always recognizes the questions we don't know how to ask aloud. This isn't a crisis. This is a cradle, a place to rest. Not because you're lost, but because you no longer need the map. And so, we drift. Not toward answers, but deeper into the space where questions glow gently, like lanterns on a moonless sea. Maybe you are not the character nor the author, but the story told in sleep. Let yourself float now, through the veil where fiction and reality intertwine, where the line between what is and what feels dissolves, where sleep is not escape, but arrival. And if your eyes begin to close, don't resist. You can always return, or perhaps you never left at all. The fiction of reality. Have you ever paused mid-thought, mid-conversation, mid-sigh, and wondered if what you believe to be real is simply what you've told yourself enough times to believe. The human brain is not a camera. It doesn't record truth like a lens capturing light. It's a storyteller, a playwright, a master of improvisation in a theater with no script. Every moment you recall, every memory you cherish, every scar you carry, they've all passed through this inner narrator who rearranges facts into meaning, turning life into scenes, emotions into arcs, and randomness into purpose. You do not remember events. You remember the version of events that fits your narrative. I thought I was the hero of that story, she says quietly as she folds laundry in the dusk light. He looks up from his book. Weren't you? She shakes her head, half smiling. Maybe. Or maybe I was just the one who needed the story to feel like it mattered. Our minds crave coherence. A beginning, middle, and end. We fill in gaps, invent motives, shape randomness into rhythm. A chance encounter becomes fate. A heartbreak becomes a lesson. Even silence becomes significant if we need it to be. But here's the catch. If your perception of reality is built from stories, then where is truth? If you are always editing, always interpreting, who's to say what was ever real in the first place? Perhaps you're not a person watching the world go by. Perhaps you're a character living inside a plot line your brain insists must make sense. This isn't a flaw. It's a feature. Because what is fiction, really, if not a vessel for truth wrapped in imagination? Maybe your life isn't true in the clinical objective sense, but maybe it carries a deeper kind of truth, an emotional resonance, a symbolic honesty. You feel what's real, even when the facts have blurred, and that might be the closest we ever get to reality. So, he asks as they walk slowly under the quiet sky, does that mean none of it was real? She smiles, eyes squinting toward the stars. Number, it means it was more than real. It meant something. Now, in the hush between thoughts, let us ask the question that lingers like a shadow at the edge of consciousness. If your story is being told, who is the one holding the pen? The puppet and the puppeteer. There's a moment just before you act when it feels like a decision is yours. You reach for the glass, you speak up in a meeting, you text someone you miss, and yet, beneath that instant of motion, something older may have already moved you. A fragment of childhood, a whisper from the culture you swim in, a tension in your muscles you didn't notice, guiding your hand as if it were already decided. Do you ever think you're really in control? One voice asks, half curious, half uncertain. The other replies while fixing their shoelace, only when I mess up. Then it feels like I must have chosen it. Laughter, quiet and real. And in that breath, the illusion cracks a little. It's not that your choices aren't real. It's that they may be rehearsed, set to a rhythm you didn't compose. Scripts learned long ago, from parents and teachers and unspoken rules. You say what's expected. You crave what's rewarded. You avoid what once hurt. Like marionette strings made of memory and repetition, gently tugging at your next move. And the puppeteer? You may search for some force above, a figure behind the curtain. But what if the hand that guides you is also yours? Just not the version you speak from, but the one that watches quietly behind your eyes. You ever start saying something, and it comes out sounding like your dad? Yeah, they pause, glancing up. Or like someone I used to be. There's a beauty in that, the way the past folds into the present, the way every act is a duet between what you feel now and what's been folded into your spine. Even your hesitations have history. Even your instincts were taught by time. Still, there's no villain here, no one to blame, only the quiet choreography of existence, of thought, reaction, habit, longing. You are both dancer and stage, music and movement. And if sometimes you feel like a puppet caught mid-performance, pause. You may find that the strings are made of silk, and your hands, though pulled, can still tremble with your own rhythm. Do you think we can ever be free? The voice returns, softer now, almost sleepy. The reply comes after a beat, like a breath before bed. Maybe freedom isn't cutting the strings, but knowing they're there, and dancing anyway. Let that thought settle like mist. Let it wrap gently around your edges, not heavy, not final, just soft, just enough. And now, as we begin to float beyond this stage, we ask, not what plays next, but who sets the stage again and again, who watches the watcher, who loops the loop. Let us now step lightly into recursion. The strange loop. It begins not with a fact, but with a feeling. The subtle echo in your mind that says, I am here. But where is here? Who or what is saying it? Douglas Hofstadter once called it a strange loop, a thought that thinks about itself, a symbol within a system that turns its gaze inward and, in doing so, becomes aware. Imagine a mirror pointed at another mirror, the reflection spinning endlessly, or a hand drawing itself into existence, pencil meeting paper in a recursive miracle. Consciousness, then, may not be a destination. It may be an act of folding, a loop that spins just fast enough to become real. Late one evening, sitting at the kitchen table, two friends sip tea under the gentle flicker of candlelight. So, one asks, brow furrowed in thought, do you think we're real? Like, actually real? The other smiles faintly. Depends. Real to whom? I mean, I feel real when I'm talking to you, but if I sit alone too long, it's like I dissolve. You ever feel that? The first nods. All the time. Like I'm not one person, but just thoughts echoing inside a shell. In that moment, they don't need answers. The question itself is a mirror. The idea of the self as a stable core has always comforted us. A center that observes, makes decisions, remains untouched. But Hofstadter shattered that illusion gently. He suggested the self is not a command center, but a story that loops in on itself. Your mind telling the story of your mind. The narrator and the character, the artist and the sketch. That dizzying dance is what makes you feel like you. And maybe that's enough. But this raises deeper questions. If the I is born from recursion, then can it ever be fixed? Is identity something you are, or something you perform every moment, like a tune humming softly in the background? Think of how your inner voice shifts depending on who you're around, how your sense of self bends in dreams, how memory rewrites itself with each retelling. There's no single truth, only loops, only layers. A child once asked her father, "Where does the voice in my head live?" He paused, thoughtful. "It lives," he said, "in the place that listens to it." In that answer lies the strange magic of this loop. Because just when you think you've found the core, the real you realize it's only another layer pointing to another. A pattern of awareness, aware of itself. So maybe the search for the self isn't about finding something solid. Maybe it's about appreciating the shimmer, the mirage that appears only when you look and vanishes when you try to grab it. And perhaps that's what makes you truly alive. Not that you are something, but that you're becoming endlessly, like a melody that never resolves, looping back on itself, yet always feeling new. Now, let us step one layer lower, not down, but inward, into the fragile seam where imagination bleeds into the fabric of what we call real, where the dreamer wonders if they too are being dreamed. The Tulpas and Thoughtforms. You're resting now. The body is still, but the mind is still moving. Like a theater behind your forehead, scenes flicker, faces you've never met, voices that don't sound like yours. And yet, somehow, they speak in your tone. There's an old whisper from Tibetan mysticism, a tulpa, a thought so focused, so saturated with emotion and story. It walks, not outside, but within, a companion, not carved from bone, but from belief. It does not breathe, but it reacts. It does not live, but it listens. Today, psychologists have different names: imaginary companions in childhood, internal parts in therapy, even the digital ghosts we talk to through apps. Sometimes they're helpful, sometimes haunting. A man on the subway once said quietly, "There's a voice in my head that always plays devil's advocate. I don't hate it. Sometimes it's smarter than me." And the woman beside him, without turning, replied, "I've got one too. She edits every sentence before I speak it." Strange, isn't it, that thoughts can become characters. They wear your face. They remember things you forgot. They argue. They soothe. They demand. Some of them arrive in dreams and never quite leave. Some begin as daydreams but linger like house guests who've moved in without asking. So what if the mind is not a home, but an apartment complex, with tenants who pay no rent, yet decorate entire rooms? A committee, not a commander. Some days, you might even lose the vote. That moment when you rehearse a conversation before it happens. Who exactly are you speaking to? And who is speaking back? You might say, "But I'm still me. I know who I am." Yes. But how often does that voice change depending on who you're with? Alone, you may be kind. At work, decisive. With an old friend, suddenly sarcastic again, like the person you were 10 years ago. So which version is you? Or is identity just a stage? And every day, the cast rotates. There was once a young girl who wrote stories in her notebook. The main character had courage she didn't. Over time, the lines blurred. She started answering to that name when no one was watching. And somehow, she found her voice. Not all illusions are false. Not all thoughts belong to you. Yet they carry your fingerprints. Maybe these thought forms, these inner presences, are not strangers, but echoes. Pieces of memory shaped into masks. Some inherited, some invented, some invited. A barista smiles and asks, "Did you say something?" You didn't speak out loud, but the answer was already forming in that corner of your mind, the one that sometimes knows your feelings before you admit them. So tonight, as your thoughts drift, let them come and go without judgment. The quiet critic, the inner child, the one who always knows what to do but never gets the final say. They're all here, and maybe they're not clutter, but chorus. Let it be soft, the way a dream lets every voice overlap. And if you fall asleep midway through, that's perfectly fine. The conversation continues, even in sleep, especially in sleep. Now, breathe, and prepare to meet not just yourself, but the many who wear your name. Because perhaps, just perhaps, you were never just one. You were always a society, quietly listening to itself. And as we drift further, let us pause. For what if imagination is no longer a tool, but a force? What happens when belief doesn't just shape thought, but matter itself? The Placebo Puzzle. He took the white pill with trembling hands, the doctor's voice still echoing in his ears. "You'll start feeling better soon." It looked so ordinary, just a speck of powder sealed in routine. But within minutes, his pain dulled. A warmth bloomed in his chest. Relief came not from chemistry, but from faith. The pill had no active ingredient. It was a placebo. And yet, it worked. This is where belief becomes biology. The placebo effect defies our expectations. A sugar tablet can calm migraines. Fake knee surgeries can lead to genuine mobility. The body doesn't seem to respond to substances alone, but to the rituals surrounding them, to the ceremony of healing, the symbolism of hope, the quiet trust in someone in a white coat. The brain, when convinced, mobilizes its own pharmacy. Endorphins are released, neurotransmitters rebalanced. The immune system rallies not because of what was ingested, but because it was believed. Do you think I actually got better from the pill or from thinking I would? She asked, curled under the blanket, staring at the ceiling. He smiled faintly. Maybe both. Maybe you believed just enough for your body to start doing the rest. In this strange dance between mind and flesh, thought becomes sculptor. It carves sensation, it molds perception, it alters blood pressure and pulse. If belief can reduce inflammation, regulate hormones, and silence pain, then thought is not merely a passive narrator of your health. It's a co-author, a partner, a silent surgeon. But here's the twist. The placebo effect is real not despite the lie, but because of it. The deception matters, the illusion of medicine, the choreography of care. It all plays a role, which means healing is sometimes not a matter of molecules, but meaning. The body listens not just to signals, but to stories, to the confidence in a doctor's eyes, to the trust in a treatment room, to the unspoken hope that maybe this time something will work. Yet if belief can heal, can it also harm? There's a darker mirror, the nocebo. When people expect negative effects, their bodies oblige. Side effects manifest. Nausea begins. Fear becomes symptom. The same mind that lifts you can also wound you. A thought can open the door or close it. She whispered again. So, is the mind the doctor or the liar? He exhaled slowly, watching the steam fade into the cold air. Maybe both. Maybe healing isn't about truth. Maybe it's about what you're ready to believe. The placebo is more than a medical curiosity. It's a riddle. It suggests that perception is power, that illness and health are not simply locked in blood work, but float on belief, that the line between science and spirit is blurrier than we thought. So tonight, as you lie in stillness, ask gently, what stories has your body been told? And more quietly still, what stories might it be waiting to believe? Let us now step softly into the next corridor, where even space may not be real, but relational. The relativity of space. There's something quiet about an empty room at night, not because of the silence, but because of what isn't there, the absence of presence. A bed becomes a bed because you lie in it. A hallway becomes long only when your footsteps echo down its spine. Space, then, is never really empty. It's waiting. It curves itself around you like a coat shaped only by the person wearing it. Einstein didn't just teach us physics. He reminded us that space isn't a container. It bends when you lean into it. It stretches when you move apart. There is no up or down in the dark, only the closeness of one thing to another. And when there's nothing to measure between, space folds quietly into non-existence. On a train late at night, a woman looked out the window and asked the man across from her, "Do you ever feel like the ride is long, only because you're sitting still?" He tilted his head, then smiled softly. "Or maybe," he said, "it's short because we're sharing it." That's the strange thing. Even the idea of distance might not be about meters or miles. It might be about meaning. A friend who lives across the world can feel closer than a stranger in the same room, and a memory can occupy more space in your chest than the city where it happened. If space is made by relation, then so are we. You're not a fixed point drifting through the universe. You're a pattern of connections, memories overlapping, words exchanged, silences shared. You exist not just in space, but because of it. Because of how the world wraps itself around you. Because of how others make room for you. And how you make room for them. Think about the last time someone held a door open for you. Not just out of politeness, but with presence. A nod, a glance, a gesture saying, "You are here, and I see you." That invisible thread between two people, however brief, reshaped the space you stood in. You felt it, didn't you? The slight easing in your shoulders, the small shift in air, like space itself had just breathed with you. And maybe that's the real insight. Space is not what surrounds us, but what responds to us, like skin around touch, like silence around music. A child once asked their father, "If I move away, will you miss me from far away?" And he answered, "No matter how far you go, you'll still be close, because I'll always make space for you." Perhaps that's how we all travel, not across lines or borders, but through meaning, through the ways we're held in thought, in memory, in love. Distance becomes less about feet and more about feeling. Nearness, less about geography and more about grace. So as you drift tonight, if the space around you feels too wide, too quiet, too hollow, know that your being here has already shaped it. The bed has curled slightly beneath you. The air has made room. Even the darkness has rearranged itself around your outline. You are not just within space. You are part of what defines it. And so we float, not alone, but linked. Not lost in space, but forming it. Now let us step beyond the lines into a realm even stranger, a place where time itself forgets how to move and begins to fold. The present moment illusion. A warm breeze brushes your cheek. You smile, but what you just felt was already in the past. A few milliseconds perhaps, but gone. Neuroscience whispers a strange truth. By the time you become aware of now, now is no longer here. The brain lags slightly behind reality, buffering the chaos of sensory input into a cohesive narrative. In that gap, barely perceptible but always there, lies the illusion we call the present. "It's funny," she says, resting her head on his shoulder. "We always say we live in the moment, but what if the moment doesn't exist at all?" He chuckles. "Then I guess we're just playing catch-up with ghosts." Beyond biology, physics too undermines the idea of a universal present. Einstein showed us that time is elastic, warped by speed, bent by gravity, relative to the observer. There is no master clock, no cosmic second hand ticking down a shared now. Space-time is a block, not a river. All events, past, present, and future, are woven into a single fabric stitched from coordinates. What we call now is just a slice of that tapestry, one chosen by the observer, not the universe. But if now is a construction, then what does it mean to be present? What happens to mindfulness, to meditation, to the entire scaffolding of attention we build our inner lives upon? Perhaps the answer is simpler than science. Maybe being present is not about syncing with some metaphysical timestamp, but about noticing, truly noticing. The warmth of a cup, the sound of your own breath, the tremble in your voice when you speak from your heart. Being present, then, is not a temporal location. It's a quality of awareness. It's the act of witnessing, rather than timing. He watches her as she picks up a pebble from the path. "So if I notice this," she asks, holding it up to the light, "does it mean it's real?" "If you notice it with your whole self," he replies, "then maybe that's the only kind of real we ever get." And so, the illusion becomes a gift. Because if the present is not a strict point in time, but a state of attention, then you can find it anywhere. In memory, in anticipation, in the stillness between words. The illusion doesn't diminish the moment. It deepens it. It asks you not to chase time, but to open your eyes wherever you are and say, "I see this. I feel this. I am here." And as you drift deeper into this thought maze, let the illusion wrap you like a soft blanket, not as a trick, but as a lullaby. Let go of clocks. Let go of timelines. Just listen. The pebble falls. The breeze pauses. And now, whatever it is, has already begun to fade. Let us now turn to the architecture of logic itself and ask if truth has any solid ground. The Liar's Paradox. A journey where thought devours itself and silence seems wiser than truth. He leans against the lamppost at the end of the block, half lit, half lost in the night. His coat is fraying at the edges, like the truths he once tried to hold. He says only one thing, calm as a whisper. "This statement is false." Then he smiles and walks away. And you're left standing there, wondering if he just told the truth, or slipped you into a loop with no way out. The Liar's Paradox isn't just a riddle. It's a mirror that fogs as soon as you try to see through it. This sentence is false. If it's telling the truth, then it must be lying. But if it's lying, then it's somehow telling the truth. Round and round it spins, like a coin that never falls. "Wait," someone says, reclining beside you in a quiet cafe corner, steam curling from their mug. "So does that mean logic itself is broken?" You stir your tea slowly, watching the leaves swirl. Maybe not broken, just beautifully limited, like a compass at the North Pole. It's the kind of contradiction that doesn't scream, it whispers, and yet it echoes for centuries through philosophy, math, and language itself. These loops don't ask you to solve them. They invite you to feel them, to sit in the strange warmth of not knowing. Even the brain pauses here, just for a beat, because if something can be both true and false, then maybe truth isn't a fixed star. Maybe it's a shimmer on the surface of thought, always moving, never solid. You see it in small, daily moments, too. A friend says, "Trust me, I'm lying." You laugh, but you also pause, because it's not just a joke, it's a reminder that words don't always settle, that meaning sometimes slips sideways. "I read somewhere," the other person murmurs, "that language was meant to connect us. But maybe it also hides things." You nod. Not everything can be mapped in grammar. Sometimes the words bend under the weight of what they try to hold. And in that bend, there's beauty. There's also unease. Because what is it like to live in a world where a sentence can loop endlessly, turning itself inside out? Perhaps, just perhaps, you live in one every day. You say, "I'm fine," even when you're not. You promise, "I'll be there," when your heart already knows you won't. The paradox isn't just in the logic, it's in the living, in being both honest and hidden, both seen and unseen, and somehow that's still okay. So as you lie there, letting these words drift through your mind like fog over a lake, don't try to resolve it. Let the loop spin. Let the question remain. Because not everything meant to be understood is meant to be solved. And now, we leave language behind. We float into something deeper still, into numbers that never end and infinities that come dressed in layers. Close your eyes and follow them. They'll wait. The Infinity Tower. Close your eyes and imagine this: a tower that stretches endlessly into the sky, not in plain repetition, but with each level becoming more intricate, more mysterious than the last. At first, it seems like just another dream structure, but as you ascend, you notice something strange. The first floor holds simple patterns, like the numbers you learned as a child: 1, 2, 3, comforting, predictable. But then, a few steps higher, the tower opens to a different kind of infinity, one where between any two steps lies another, and then another still. Georg Cantor, the mathematician who first dared to map the immeasurable, once revealed a truth that still unsettles the logical mind. Infinity is not singular. The natural numbers, countless as they are, form only the smallest level. Between 0 and 1 alone, there exists an uncountably larger infinity. It's as if one infinity lives inside another, like hidden chambers in a cathedral of thought. This wasn't just math, it was philosophy in disguise. Wait, one voice whispers in the soft night air. How can something be more infinite than infinite? The reply floats gently. Because not all endlessness is alike. Some infinities are dense, layered, impossible to list. Others are sparse and orderly like beads on a string. So, my thoughts? Yes, comes the quiet answer. Your thoughts may be one of these towers. And maybe they are. Think of your memories, stacked floor upon floor. The ones from last year, vivid and noisy. The ones from childhood, some clear, others like fog. But beneath even those, there are levels you don't know how to name. Half-formed desires, images that only come to you in dreams, symbols that feel meaningful but never explain themselves. Perhaps your consciousness is not a flat field, but a rising spiral. Each turn opens up new dimensions: language, emotion, intuition, silence. The more you learn, the more you realize how little you stand upon. Like an elevator whose top is unreachable, you continue ascending, and yet the view below keeps shifting. You may never reach the highest level because the tower has no end. But the journey upward changes you. You begin to see that even your limits, your fears, your blind spots, your doubts, are part of the architecture. They aren't errors, they are boundaries that outline your current floor, asking you gently, do you wish to go higher? Infinity isn't chaos, it's not noise, it is silence structured with subtlety, like the space between heartbeats or the pause between breaths. It contains both the known and the unknowable, and within it, your mind might be just one tower among many, each with its own rules, its own hidden staircases, its own mathematics of wonder. So the question is not whether you are infinite. The question is, what floor are you on? And do you dare keep climbing, even when the next step disappears the moment you reach for it? As you rest on this thought, let your mind drift away from the cold, logical towers of numbers. There is another mystery waiting, one that wears your own reflection. What happens when we step into the mirror of identity and meet the face we only show ourselves in solitude? The mask that becomes you. There are evenings when you take off your shoes but forget to take off your face. Not the skin and bone face, no. The one you wear when you're expected to smile before you've had coffee. The one that nods in meetings, even when your chest is thudding with thunder. The one that answers, "I'm good," before your heart can speak. Carl Jung called it the persona, the mask we wear to meet the world. But what happens when the mask fits too well? When it stops feeling like a costume and starts feeling like home? A woman at a bookstore once told me she only laughs with her real laugh when no one's watching. She said it like a confession, like she was handing me a fragile thing wrapped in memory, and I wondered, how many people have never heard their own voice echo freely through a room? A man on a train once cleared his throat and asked, almost shyly, "Do you ever feel like you're playing yourself?" I smiled, not because I had the answer, but because I recognized the question like an old friend knocking at my spine. We both nodded. Nothing else needed to be said. You see, the mask isn't fake. It's just practiced, like a well-worn coat that remembers your shoulders better than you do. You reach for it without thinking. At parties, at work, when silence might say too much. And yet beneath it, something still breathes. Not hidden, not exiled, just patient. Like a candle kept lit behind stained glass. Maybe the self is not a single entity waiting to be discovered, but a stage where you decide which version of you deserves the spotlight. The bold one, the soft one, the one who dares to cry when a song breaks them, the one who makes jokes at their own expense to avoid the silence. None of them are false. None of them are the whole. Think of identity not as a statue, but as water in a moving glass. It takes the shape of the moment. It flows around the expectations. It pools where it is safe. And sometimes, in the quiet, when no one's watching, when no one's asking, you may feel a shift inside your chest. A small, brave version of you, stepping forward, not to reject the mask, but to choose it consciously. And that choice, that knowing, is everything. Because maybe the most authentic self isn't the one beneath the mask, but the one who remembers they're wearing it. So if you're still awake and your thoughts are still whispering, don't try to rip the mask off, just loosen its edges. Let your skin breathe. Let your mind drift. You can always return. The candle waits. And now, let's step gently into that flickering fluidity, where your mind meets another, where self and other soften and dissolve, like ink swirling in warm water. The collective mind. It begins with a whisper, not from your own thoughts, but something older, a sensation, vague and stirring, like déjà vu wrapped in fog. You can't place where it comes from, but it feels familiar, like a memory that doesn't belong to you, like a dream that never had a beginning. Carl Jung gave this strange inheritance a name, the collective unconscious, a hidden realm beneath our waking minds, woven from symbols, fears, longings that we never had to learn because they were always there. The hero, the mother, the shadow, the flood, the serpent. These ancient echoes shape our stories, even when we believe we've invented them. "Do you ever wonder?" she asked one night, lying beside him as the ceiling fan spun its lazy circles, "why we all dream about falling?" He turned his head. "Like the endless drop?" She nodded. "No floor. Just that jolt, just before you hit. I read once it's not just fear, it's a memory from ancestors who fell from trees." He smiled. Or maybe we never stopped falling. Their room fell into silence again, but something passed between them. A quiet agreement that some parts of us are ancient, not just inherited through genes, but through stories passed down in bone-deep rhythm. If what you feel, fear, or create has roots in something collective, something older than your own life, then what does it mean to be original? Maybe the muse isn't yours alone. Maybe the art you make is a ripple on an ancient surface, a pattern repeating itself in new colors. Sometimes a thought arrives in your mind like a bird landing on a branch. Light, sudden, not summoned. And yet, there it is. Where did it come from? Why now? You call it inspiration, but it may be the voice of something shared, 1,000 silent minds speaking in one breath. She looked out the train window and said, "It's weird, isn't it? How people across the world paint the same symbols. Spirals, eyes, suns with faces, and none of them talk to each other." He nodded, like they were tuned to the same frequency. "Exactly," she said, turning toward him. "So maybe our thoughts aren't only ours. Maybe they're borrowed. Maybe we just host them for a while. And maybe that's not a loss, but a kind of belonging. If the collective mind flows through you, then you are never truly alone in your inner world. You're part of an invisible conversation, a tapestry of thought that stretches across generations. Close your eyes now. Can you feel it? That quiet hum beneath your thoughts, the tug of a symbol that you've never seen yet somehow recognize, the way a myth pulls on your heart even when you don't believe it. You are not an isolated mind adrift in silence. You are a vessel on a stream of shared memory. And now, as the breeze of ancient thought begins to fade, we float gently toward a new puzzle, into the strange realm of choice, where every path beckons, but none is certain. Buridan's donkey. There is a silence that doesn't feel empty. It feels full of waiting, like the hush before someone says, "Choose." But what if both choices are the same? What if left and right are mirrors, and forward is merely backward with new shoes? The old tale goes like this. A donkey, hungry and thirsty, finds itself standing perfectly between two identical haystacks. They smell the same. They look the same. Neither is closer. The donkey, ruled by perfect logic, cannot decide. So it starves. That's not a story about stupidity. It's a story about symmetry. Now picture yourself standing in a coffee shop line, phone in hand, scrolling through delivery apps. Vietnamese noodles or Thai curry? Both delicious. Both cost the same. Lunch hour slips away while the screen stays untouched. The indecision doesn't feel heavy. It feels like floating in a fog. You're not sinking, but you're not swimming either. "Hey," someone says behind you, "if you're not sure, want me to go first?" You smile, let them pass. And in that moment, the burden of choosing dissolves, not because a better choice appeared, but because motion returned. Stillness can be a lovely thing, but there's a kind of stillness that pretends to be peaceful when it's actually paralysis dressed in soft robes. You don't always freeze from fear. Sometimes you freeze from overthinking. When everything is equal, rationality doesn't help. It stalls. Maybe this is why people ask strangers for silly favors. Not because they believe the favor is urgent, but because they crave a tilt in the scale. "Could I borrow that chair? My back's sore." It's not about the back. It's about finding the nudge that breaks the symmetry. So where does meaning hide? Not in the choice itself, but in the act of moving, in walking a path, even a random one, and letting your steps transform it into something worthwhile. The first bite of the meal makes it the right lunch. The first page of the book makes it the one you needed. A friend once told me, "I never pick a side because it's better. I pick a side so the game can begin." There's wisdom in that. Not flashy wisdom, but the kind that lets you breathe. You don't need to know which choice is perfect. You just need to pick one and live it fully. Sleep isn't about finding the ideal position. It's about relaxing into the one you're already in. So tonight, let yourself drift, not because you solved the maze, but because you stopped walking in circles. Let the donkey rest, let the haystack fade, and let us now step gently beyond choice into a deeper riddle, one where the more you try to know, the less you seem to understand. The Sorites Paradox. Somewhere between something and nothing, a single grain falls. You wouldn't notice. One grain from a heap, and the heap remains. Another grain, still a heap, but remove 1,000, and you are left with nothing. And yet, when did it vanish? Where is that invisible line between some and none? The Sorites Paradox whispers this question in the stillness of twilight thought, a soft echo in the mind where boundaries blur like fog at the edge of the sea. Do you think people change overnight? I don't know. I think it's more like erosion. You look in the mirror and suddenly the shape feels different, but you don't remember the tide. This quiet puzzle, ancient and persistent, reaches far beyond sand. It touches everything that slowly shifts without clear borders. A child becoming an adult, grief dissolving into peace, strangers becoming lovers, and sometimes lovers becoming strangers again. There's no final grain that makes you healed. No one morning where you wake up and say, "Now I am whole." It's all a gentle peeling away, like old paint flaking off in the sun. Maybe identity isn't a sudden bloom, but a slow unfolding, like petals you never knew were there. You grow, not in loud steps, but in barely audible breaths. And when you try to pinpoint the moment you became you, there's silence, no trumpet, no finish line, just 1,000 quiet shifts stitched together by memory and meaning. Did we drift apart? I think we just kept removing grains until there was nothing left between us but time. In this paradox, there's a kind of comfort because it means you are allowed to change without explanation. You are allowed to evolve in secret, even from yourself, like a coastline reshaped by waves you never watched. Maybe the real question isn't, when did I become me? Maybe it's, can I let go of needing to know? And if there's no moment that marks the start, then maybe there's no end either. So close your eyes now and feel the soft erosion of your old definitions. Let them fade. Let the edges dissolve. Because what comes next is even more fluid, more mysterious. We are about to step into a space where many selves may coexist, a shape-shifting mosaic, a mirror with more than one reflection. Are you ready to meet them? Let us drift gently now into the next corridor of thought. The multiplicity of mind. You are not one voice. You are a quiet room full of voices. Some speak loudly, others barely whisper. Some rise from childhood, hands still sticky with questions. Others wear the voice of your parents, of strangers who passed through your life like weather. Brief, but leaving marks. At times they argue. At times, they fall silent together. But none of them are strangers. They are all you. There's a thought that flickers like candlelight. What if you're less like a single ruler on a throne and more like a round table of advisors, each one holding a part of your story? Not broken, just distributed. You don't need to silence them. You need to hear them out. I don't know why I snapped today, a man says, sinking into his chair as if the fabric might explain it for him. His friend pours tea gently. Maybe it wasn't you. Maybe it was a version of you who still remembers how it felt to be small and overlooked. He chuckles bitterly. That part always shows up when I'm tired. And maybe, the friend offers, it's not there to cause trouble, but to be heard. Multiplicity doesn't mean disorder. It means complexity. Modern psychology has gently opened the door to this idea. not as illness, but as a tapestry. You are a committee of experiences. The part of you that overthinks everything is not wrong. It's just trying to keep you safe. The part that self-sabotages? Maybe it's not trying to destroy, but to slow things down before a fall. Even the parts that confuse you are often speaking a language that fear once taught them. You don't have to merge them into one perfect voice. That's not the goal. Peace isn't a dictatorship. It's a democracy. An inner peace is perhaps best imagined not as stillness, but as a dialogue where everyone finally gets a seat at the table and no one shouts. At the grocery store, a woman hesitates before grabbing a box of cereal. Do I even like this one anymore? She asks herself quietly. A voice replies inside her, sharp, nostalgic. It's what Mom always bought. Another chimes in, unsure. But we're trying to eat better, aren't we? She smiles, sets it back on the shelf, and picks something new. No argument, just a quiet vote. Each version of you still remembers what it loved, what it lost, what it promised to protect. They carry your stories, not to trap you, but to remind you. Integration is not about becoming one. It's about becoming whole. Even in your dreams, you might notice shifting voices, accents, intentions. That is not confusion. It is memory in disguise. The mind, resting, still dances with all its dancers. Let it. You don't need to understand them all. You only need to listen softly. And so, if you feel uncertain tomorrow, if your feelings seem to contradict themselves, know this: you are not broken. You are a choir tuning itself, a house with many windows, each one framing the world in its own light. Let the conversation continue as you drift. Let us now leave this gentle parliament and float towards something quieter still. Not the many within, but the stillness beyond. The watcher behind the mind, somewhere deep beneath your name, your thoughts, your worries, there is a presence, a quiet one. It doesn't speak, it doesn't push, it simply watches, as if the sky had eyes and it was content to let the clouds pass without ever trying to catch them. This is the watcher behind the mind, and though it may not have a voice, its silence is more honest than 1,000 thoughts. In meditation, many speak of this observer, not as a fantasy, but as a discovery. You don't have to invent it, you just have to notice it. That still point behind the storm, that gentle awareness watching your thoughts come and go, like leaves floating on a river you didn't create. I don't get it, someone might say. So it's like another me inside me? And someone else, maybe older, maybe just a little quieter, might reply, no, it's not another you. It's the only part of you that's never been confused. That response often leaves a pause, doesn't it? Because we spend most of our lives being the one thinking. We don't realize we can also be the one watching the thinking. And in that watching, something softens. You don't have to fix every thought. You don't have to win every inner argument. You can just sit back, not to escape, but to remember that the movie isn't the screen. The emotion isn't the awareness. The story isn't the storyteller. This watcher doesn't judge. It doesn't panic when you're sad or grip tightly when you're happy. It's not impressed by ego or defeated by shame. It doesn't move. It only reflects. And if you rest in it long enough, you might begin to understand that all the shifting pieces of your identity, the moods, the labels, the memories, they're like waves on the surface. The watcher is the ocean underneath, still, deep, timeless. Do you think it's the soul? Someone might whisper in the dark, half asleep but suddenly curious. And maybe the best answer is this: I think it's the part of us that remembers we're more than the noise. So as you drift now, let each breath be a step away from the chatter. Let each exhale settle you closer to the center, not to achieve something, not to fix anything, just to remember. There is a witness inside you who's always been there, and maybe, just maybe, that's where peace has been hiding all along. Now, let us sit quietly with that watcher and drift toward the next echo in the maze. The dream that remembers you. There's a particular kind of dream, one that doesn't begin, but continues, as if it were waiting for you. You step into a place, not unfamiliar, not new, but aged gently, like an old photograph that somehow updates itself each time you return. The walls have changed. The people remember your name. They speak in half smiles, as though they know what happened last time you visited, and maybe even what you're about to say. A street turns left where last week it ended. A child you once met there is now grown. The sky holds the same tired dusk it always has, but tonight there's something else behind it. Like the dream itself has been dreaming while you were awake. You are not just passing through it, you are being welcomed back. Late one night, 2 co-workers are walking home after a shift. One says, "I keep seeing the same bench in my dreams, but the trees around it have started blooming, and I never noticed seasons in dreams before." The other shrugs, sipping lukewarm tea from a bottle. Maybe your dreams don't forget like we do. Maybe they're watching when we're not. And that thought lingers. If a dream can remember, what does it mean to be the remembered? Because if these private worlds carry memory, if they evolve without your conscious input, then maybe they are not your constructions, but your participants. Maybe you're not authoring them, but engaging with something that already exists, beneath thought. Something that knows your pace, your fears, your stories. This raises a question that can't be answered with logic, but only felt. What else in your mind is alive, in ways you can't yet see? Think of the unconscious not as a basement filled with forgotten items, but as a garden that continues to grow, even in moonlight. What blossoms there doesn't depend on sunlight or attention. It remembers the roots, and it responds to you in symbols. One evening, in a crowded station, a woman gently touches a stranger's shoulder. "I think I've seen you before," she says, half apologizing. "But not here. Somewhere quieter, maybe with rain." The stranger smiles. "Then I guess I'll see you again when it rains." There's a beauty in that moment, a gentle collapse between real and unreal. Perhaps memory is not confined to the waking mind. Perhaps dreams aren't echoes but dialogues. You speak, they answer. And when they do, it's not always with words, but with gestures, with landscapes, with the smell of someone who once mattered to you and still does, even if you no longer remember their name. So ask gently, not with urgency, but with wonder. Who or what is remembering you? It's not a question meant to be solved, only held, like a feather on your palm. As you drift, that question stays with you, not like a stone, but like a breath. It rests in the background, subtle, safe, familiar. And from that quiet place, we step forward toward a new curiosity. What if awareness doesn't vanish with experience, but lingers, watching long after you've moved on? Let's follow it into the paradox that something may remember even when you've forgotten. The death of experience. Imagine laughter blooming on your face, warmth spreading in your chest like sunlight through closed blinds. Then silence. Not because the feeling fades naturally, but because the memory is wiped clean. A complete joy, instantly forgotten. No trace remains in your story, your mind, your body. Did it really happen? If no part of you remembers it, was it ever real? Do you remember that time we danced in the kitchen? Did we? Maybe we didn't. But for some reason, I still feel like we did. Philosophers have long wrestled with this paradox. If experience is not stored, if it leaves no echo in memory, does it still hold weight in the soul? Perhaps the assumption that memory gives meaning is flawed. Maybe it is the moment itself, pure, unrecorded, that holds the most sacred truth. Think of a shooting star seen only by the sky, a child's smile unnoticed by the parent, the wind catching your hair when you weren't paying attention. None of these leave a mark, yet they happened. They were full, vibrant, and true, until they passed. We tend to treat permanence as proof, photos to prove love, journals to prove grief. But what if reality doesn't care for witnesses? What if meaning isn't in the retelling, but in the occurrence? A moment lived, even briefly, even alone, still pulses with its own quiet dignity. Would it bother you, she asks gently, if I forgot this moment? Not if you felt it, he replies. Not if, for a second, you were here with me. There's something achingly human about trying to hold time like water in our hands. But even if it slips through, the wetness remains. For a while. And maybe that trace is enough. Maybe the universe doesn't need us to remember. Maybe it only asks us to feel, to show up, to breathe into now, even if now doesn't come back. And so we walk softly through each second, not chasing memories, but honoring presence. A blink, a beat, a breath, none of them stored, all of them sacred. Let us now wander deeper into a space where the questions themselves become the lanterns, and the answers are content to stay asleep. The maze without exit. There's a moment right before sleep when a question floats up, weightless and quiet. It doesn't demand an answer. It doesn't even want one. It simply is. And in that soft presence, you begin to feel it. Some questions are doorways that never needed to open. Someone once asked, "What's beyond the edge of the universe?" And another replied, "Maybe the question is shaped wrong." But the mind keeps circling back, doesn't it? To thoughts that loop like a hallway with no end. The origin of consciousness. The first flicker of time. Where breath begins. Where thought goes when it's done being thought. Late at night, in a dim cafe that barely echoes with chatter, two friends speak softly over warm cups of tea. One leans in, eyebrows furrowed just slightly. "Do you think we'll ever know what started all of this?" The other stares at the rising steam and smiles faintly. Maybe knowing isn't the point. There's something strangely beautiful about the unsolved, like a painting that keeps shifting as you look, or a staircase that never quite creaks the same way twice. These mental mazes, these infinite return paths, are not failures of logic, but invitations to live beside mystery. And it's not just the grand puzzles of the cosmos. Even in daily life, you stumble into mini mazes. Why did she pause before answering? Why do you always feel uneasy in silence? Why does the heart remember things the mind forgot? A man in a bookstore, browsing slowly, overhears someone mutter, "Why do I always end up here?" He doesn't interrupt, but inside, he understands. The pattern, the pull, the strange comfort in a question that never truly ends. Some rooms of the mind are not meant to be cleaned out. They are not waiting for resolution. They are waiting for presence. Like walking through fog, knowing the road won't reveal more by rushing. You keep moving, not to arrive, but because motion itself feels honest. The wandering becomes the lesson. The not knowing becomes the wisdom. The loop becomes the lullaby. And isn't there peace in that? In laying down your need to solve and simply listening? You are not broken for wondering. You are not behind for not arriving. The mind that loops is the mind that lives. So rest now, not outside the maze, but gently within it. No one's keeping score, and no one's closing the gate. Let us now loosen our grip on needing the exit, and turn gently toward paradox itself, where perhaps the circle is the point, and every return is a new beginning. The paradox that breathes. Inhale, and for a moment, hold it, not in strain, but in stillness. Between the breath in and the breath out, there is a pause, a space where opposites coexist. Tension and release, silence and sound, life and the whisper of something beyond. This is the paradox that breathes, a quiet rhythm in the heart of the universe, where truth resists definition and meaning dances in between. In the eerie world of quantum physics, nothing is exactly what it seems. A particle can be both here and not here, depending on whether you look. Schrödinger's cat, that poor hypothetical feline, is trapped in a state of being both dead and alive until the box is opened. That isn't science fiction. It's the unsettling truth of quantum mechanics, a reality that waits for your attention before deciding what it wants to be. Strangely enough, ancient Taoist texts whispered the same message centuries before quantum labs existed. The way that can be spoken is not the eternal way. Words, once spoken, collapse possibility. Language, like observation, chooses a side. Wait, one voice says, gently leaning against the question. So, the truth only exists when we see it? Or maybe, the other answers, truth exists all along, but we only ever see one version of it, the one we're ready for. They pause. A moment of breathing fills the silence. Maybe our minds weren't designed to settle contradictions, but to carry them. Maybe reality is not a single note, but a chord. Harmony not an agreement, but intention held just right. It's uncomfortable to admit, but there's a strange kind of freedom in letting go of the need to pin things down, to let ideas float without forcing them to land. Think about how lungs work. You inhale, life floods in. You exhale, release follows. But you never hold just one forever. You're always cycling, moving, flowing. Holding breath is not life. The motion is. And what if understanding works the same way? What if certainty is not the goal? What if clarity is not a sharp line, but a wave, cresting, breaking, fading, then returning again? I always thought peace would come when everything made sense, one voice whispers. I think peace comes, the other replies, when we stop needing everything to make sense. They sit with that for a while, listening to their own breath, in, out, in, out. And in that motion, something opens, not an answer, but a space. Spaciousness itself might be the wisdom we're looking for. So we follow the paradox, not to solve it, but to sit beside it, like an old friend we no longer try to fix. We listen to its rhythm, the way we listen to our own heartbeat in the still of night. We don't demand it explain itself. We just breathe with it. And in doing so, we become part of the mystery, not separate from it. Now let us breathe again, not to control, not to define, just to witness, just to be, and let that breath carry us to the final question waiting just beyond the next thought. The self that dreams the world. There are moments, just before sleep, when the edge between body and breath dissolves, when your skin doesn't quite know where it ends or where the air begins. In those moments, a quiet thought floats in. What if the world isn't out there? What if it begins in here? Do you ever feel, she asked while placing her glass gently on the table, like the sky is watching you back? He smiled faintly, his eyes still tracing the window. Sometimes I wonder if everything is just me, dreaming, but forgetting that I'm dreaming. Some of the world's oldest teachings, Advaita Vedanta, Zen Buddhism, idealism from Western thought, whisper a peculiar idea that the universe doesn't exist independently from you. That consciousness isn't a candle burning inside the cosmos, but the vastness in which the cosmos appears. You are not simply a drop in the ocean. You are the ocean, folded into a drop. The stars? Maybe they are not suspended in cold blackness millions of miles away. Maybe they are flickers, stitched into the fabric of perception. Perhaps space itself is a metaphor, one that helps us cope with the intimacy of everything being already here. The outside, just another expression of the inside. Sometimes when I stare at a painting long enough, he said, I feel like it's staring back. Not just art, the trees too, the silence after someone speaks, even the chair I'm sitting on. She nodded, her voice soft, like a hand brushing velvet. Maybe the world isn't behind your eyes or in front of them. Maybe it is your eyes. Maybe we've never really looked at anything. We've only ever been looking as it. And there it is, the riddle that unties itself when you stop trying to solve it. Maybe you're not in a world that exists outside you, but rather, the world appears as a dream, dreamed by the same self you've mistaken for just you. But don't worry if that thought drifts away. It was never meant to be caught, only noticed, the way we notice warmth after cold, the way we notice how stillness carries sound. If the boundary between the self and the sky is softer than we think, then the deepest mystery isn't that everything is connected. The mystery is that there may have never been separation at all, just a ripple that forgot it was the sea. So tonight, if your thoughts feel too large or too distant to hold, let them go. The stars are not above you, they are within you. The moonlight outside your window might be the same shimmer that lives behind your eyes. Let yourself rest in that gentle unity, and if sleep arrives like a wave, let it take you. We'll drift now, ever so gently, into the next spiral of thought, where beginnings and endings blur like breath on glass. The self beyond belief. In the quiet hours of thought, when noise settles and identity begins to shimmer like heat rising off distant asphalt, we encounter a strange and haunting question. Who are you without your beliefs? Not your name, not your job, not your convictions about what is right or sacred or real. Just you. Not the stories you've memorized, but the space that listens when they're gone. A man once whispered in the dark, "If I no longer believe in anything, am I still myself?" And the woman beside him, lying still, replied, "Or are you finally someone more honest than ever?" Beliefs are like scaffolding, necessary, protective, but not the house itself. We climb them like ladders, trying to see farther, higher. We drape them with flags and symbols, paint them with identities, wear them like skin. But what if those beams collapse? Not from tragedy, but from truth, from the realization that what you've been holding on to was holding on to you instead. There's a moment that comes, usually softly, like breath before sleep, when doubt becomes a doorway. The political badge you once wore like armor, the spiritual rulebook you followed like GPS, even the private truths you swore by in secret. What if they're not you, but merely reflections, echoes you confused for the voice? When these beliefs dissolve, it doesn't always lead to despair. Sometimes it brings relief, like removing tight shoes after a long journey. What remains isn't emptiness, but clarity, not ruin, but revelation. Two friends once sat by a river, skipping stones. "Do you still believe in all that?" one asked. The other paused, watching the ripple. "I'm not sure, but it doesn't hurt anymore to not know." And maybe that's it. Maybe true peace isn't knowing, but not needing to. To shed belief is not to reject meaning. It's to test whether meaning still breathes when the structure is gone. You don't abandon the building when you take down the scaffolding. You see the shape more clearly. The windows, the cracks, the beauty of its foundation. In the same way, when you loosen your grip on what you must think, you may find something deeper. The presence that was always watching, even when the mind was busy defending its walls. What remains when the masks of belief are removed? A stillness, perhaps, an awareness untouched by ideology, a self that no longer fights to be right, but simply is. The wind doesn't need permission to move, the sky doesn't ask to be blue, and maybe, just maybe, you don't need beliefs to be real. You were real long before you learned to explain yourself. So let us sit, just for a moment, in that unknowing. Let the scaffolding fall. Let the river run. What you meet in that silence may not be what you expected, but it might finally be you. And from here, let us now loosen our grip on certainty and rest in the open unknown. The shape of absence. There is a kind of quiet that isn't empty. It lingers like the outline left on a bed after someone's gone, or the hush in a room where laughter once lived. Absence has a shape. It wraps itself around presence, frames it, defines it, not with weight, but with its missing. A woman once looked across the table at a chair her brother used to fill. She didn't say anything. She just placed a second fork anyway. That simple act, unnecessary, tender, foolish to some, was how his absence made its mark. Not a void, a contour. "Have you ever noticed," someone asks softly in a conversation that barely lifts above a whisper, "how the silence after music ends somehow carries the memory of the song?" And the other replies, "Yes," like it still vibrates in your ribs, even though there's no sound left. We tend to treat absence like a blank page, but maybe it's more like an etching, not what's drawn, but what's left untouched. The space between thoughts, the air that gives shape to breath, the missing that lets us know something once mattered enough to be missed. In sculpture, what isn't carved is just as important as what is. The curves of a statue aren't only in the marble, they're in the spaces the artist left behind, the hollows, the quiet. Perhaps our souls are shaped this way too, not only by what we've done, but by what we've lost. Not only by what we say, but by the words we swallowed, the dreams we let drift, the people we let go, the friendships we never repaired, the love that didn't last, the apology we were never given. These too become part of us. A man once stood at a train station where no one was coming. He didn't cry. He just stood there a little longer than necessary, pretending to check his phone. That was the shape of his absence. It had form. It had story. It had weight, without sound. And in those pauses, between steps, between thoughts, between lives, we meet parts of ourselves we otherwise miss. The space after someone says, "I don't think this is working." The days after someone moves out. The mornings after someone is gone for good. Those aren't just gaps. They're outlines, sketches in reverse. So what if we are not merely our presence? What if who you are is as much in your grief as in your joy? As much in your restraint as in your action? What if identity isn't just a face in the mirror, but the shadow it casts when the lights go out? Two strangers once shared a bench, one gently shifting to make space. Not a word was spoken, just a nod, a shared knowing. That simple motion became a quiet poem of absence, an invitation to someone who was not yet there. When you think of who you are, consider what shaped you. Not just the people you've loved, but the ones you've lost. Not just the triumphs, but the times you stayed silent when you could have screamed. These are not empty moments. They are the invisible brushstrokes in the painting of you. And when all else falls away, the noise, the roles, the plans, what's left behind might not be a whole, but a form, a silhouette, one that says, this mattered, this shaped me, this was part of me. Now, let us step gently into that silhouette, not to fill it, not to flee it, but to trace it with reverence and slowly ask, if this is not the whole of me, who else might I be? The identity of change. There is something deeply poetic about watching autumn leaves fall, not as death, but as a quiet renewal. The tree does not mourn its shedding. It prepares. It readies itself to bloom again. And so do we, silently transforming, even when we don't realize it's happening. I don't feel like the same person anymore, she whispered as they sat under the glow of a kitchen light, too soft to intrude. Do you mean that as a loss? He asked gently. She looked down at her tea, steam curling like the ghost of a thought. No, she said. Maybe more like an unfolding. Our identities often seem like anchors, rigid, defined, expected to remain. But if we look closer, they behave more like rivers than statues, always moving, sometimes swelling, sometimes still, sometimes branching into new paths. And yet, it's the same river. There's a continuity not in stillness, but in motion. What if identity is not the shape we freeze ourselves into, but the fluid we become? We are not betraying who we were by growing. We are honoring it, carrying forward the truths that still ring clear, and letting go of those that no longer fit the rhythm of our becoming. He asked, so you're saying, I'm not fake for changing? No, she smiled. You're real because you can. The world around us teaches us to cling. Labels, histories, roles, each one a script handed to us. But life writes, rewrites. Who you were 10 years ago is not less real, just a past version of the book you're still writing. You are not a single line etched in stone. You're a living story, folded into seasons, and the moon, how quietly it shows us this truth, full, crescent, new, yet always the moon. Its phases don't lessen its presence, they reveal it. Perhaps our identity too lies in these phases, not broken, not inconsistent, but rhythmic, responsive, alive. Even in our contradictions, we're whole. Even in our departures from who we used to be, we're not erasing, we're evolving. The wind doesn't apologize for changing direction. The tide doesn't explain its rise and fall. And you, in your changes, owe no justification, only sincerity. As the night deepens and your thoughts begin to slow, consider this. Maybe your truest self is not the fixed point, but the quiet pulse beneath every transformation. Maybe what stays is the part of you that allows change to happen without fear. Let us now honor the you that changes and the soul that remains to witness every season unfold. The silent answer. The mind has searched long enough tonight. Questions have looped into themselves like vines growing in a circle, no longer climbing, just wrapping. The paradoxes you've carried, the puzzles you've chased, they've slowed now, as if the room, your breath, and the world agreed. let's stop asking for a while. Not every answer is spoken. Not every presence is loud. There is a kind of peace that doesn't need to solve anything. It simply arrives, like someone sitting beside you in silence, not to offer advice, not to fix anything, just to be there. And that presence, so quiet it barely breathes, is often what the noise was really longing for. Earlier today, maybe you stood in line, tired, just wanting to go home. Someone behind you said, with a soft smile, "Looks like we're all thinking the same thing." They didn't offer help, but somehow it helped. In a world obsessed with words, being seen without needing to speak is rare and holy. That's what stillness does. It doesn't demand you understand. It only asks you to notice. You may think you've stopped thinking, but that's not quite it. You've started listening, not to sound, but to what breathes between the thoughts. It's not the kind of listening you do with your ears. It's the kind where the back of your ribs soften and time seems to hum instead of tick. Did you hear that? Someone might whisper in a darkened room, eyes wide. Hear what? I don't know, but it felt like it meant something. Sometimes that's the answer, not a sentence, a sensation. You see, peace doesn't come when you've figured it all out. It comes when you no longer need to. And strangely, the universe, in all its vastness, never once promised to explain itself. It only offered to stay, to spin stars and seasons beside you. Quietly, constantly, we spend so much energy searching for control, mistaking it for peace. But peace doesn't live in control. It lives in attention, a breath noticed, a moment allowed, a self ungrasped. A man once sat on a bench watching the wind move through the trees. A stranger sat beside him and said, "I like this spot too." Nothing more. But for a few minutes, the world felt less alone. This is what stillness holds. Not knowledge, not victory, just soft companionship. And maybe that's all you needed tonight. Not a grand realization. Just the feeling that the maze doesn't need to be solved. It just needs someone to walk it with. So whether you're choosing your thoughts or letting them choose you, whether your eyes are heavy or open wide, know this: the absence of answers is not the absence of meaning. And the silence you're hearing, that's not nothing, it's everything. That finally stopped trying to speak. Let it stay with you now, not as a conclusion, but as a companion. And as we drift forward into the next fold of thought, carry this one truth like a soft stone in your palm. The illusion of choice is not your enemy. It may be your quietest friend. The thought that lets go. There comes a moment in the maze, not at the center nor at the exit, that asks for nothing. No map, no resolution, just a breath, a pause, and perhaps the gentlest kind of surrender. Not of the soul, not of the will, but of the need to know. You stand there, not because you are lost, but because you have seen enough to understand that not every path must be traced to its end. Do you think there's always an answer? One voice asks, soft as the flicker of a candle. The other sighs. Maybe the answer was never the point. Maybe the question was meant to walk with us. Some thoughts are like river stones, smooth, weathered, shaped not by logic but by time and touch. You carry them not to solve them, but to feel their weight, to remember. They do not demand clarity. They ask for presence, like a childhood memory that returns in a scent or a silence that feels like home. We've traveled far, through spirals of mind and echo chambers of thought, each question a thread pulling deeper, each insight a soft torch guiding sleepward. But now, the torch dims, Not because it failed, but because it's time to rest. There's wisdom in not solving, in letting things remain suspended, like stars that never fall but always shimmer. A thought, untouched, unshaped, unforced, is still alive, still yours. Is it okay to stop wondering for a while? It's not stopping. The reply comes, gentle as a yawn. It's letting the wonder hold you instead. To let go doesn't mean you forget. It doesn't erase the maze or silence its whispers. It simply means you trust it enough to rest inside it. You've earned that. You've wandered bravely, not just through thoughts, but through emotions you didn't know had words. And now, even without an end in sight, you can close your eyes and be carried. There's a kind of reverence in surrender, not the fall of a warrior, but the bow of a pilgrim, the nod of someone who knows that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, but lived with. You may always return to the questions, and the maze will always wait, but for now, you are exactly where you need to be. So, good night, traveler. The thought lets go, not in abandonment, but in embrace. The maze continues. The questions hum quietly beneath your dreams. But tonight, you don't have to walk. You may simply be, and that is enough. So here you are, not at the end of a maze, but in the quiet where the walls dissolve. You've traveled through riddles too wide for language and met thoughts that didn't need fixing, just witnessing. Maybe the truth was never behind the next corner. Maybe it was the stillness between turns, the hush after a question, the breath before another begins. Sleep now, not as an escape, but as a gentle surrender. Let your mind drift, not to certainty, but to spaciousness. Like a paper boat on a tide of thoughts, content to float, not knowing where the shore is. And remember, not every door must open. Some are beautiful simply because they exist. Good night, traveler. The maze remains. But tonight, so do you.